The night was silent, heavier than any ordinary darkness. Within the heart of the Vatican, deep beneath centuries of stone and faith, lay a place few had ever seen. A vault sealed in mystery, guarded by whispers and fear. Torches flickered against carved walls, casting shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. Somewhere beyond the cold stone corridors, a door stood hidden, bearing no mark, a door that led to something forbidden. They called it the Vatican's darkest manuscript. Not just any book. A chronicle said to hold secrets older than any scripture. A story of human origins unlike anything ever told. And the church had locked it away for centuries. Why? What was in those pages that required eternal silence? The world outside knew nothing. Scholars dismissed it as legend. Historians called it myth. Yet for centuries, the rumor persisted. A manuscript so dangerous, so powerful, that revealing it could shake the foundations of history, faith, and human identity. A truth too perilous for mankind. The scene inside the vault was one of ritual. The air smelled of candle wax and old parchment. The floor was cold beneath the boots of the guardians, men sworn to silence. Each step echoed like a warning. They carried no torches openly. Light came from hidden niches carved into the stone, their glow casting an otherworldly shimmer across the chamber. At the center lay a stone pedestal, wrapped in cloth older than memory. Beneath it, concealed within layers of iron and secrecy, lay the manuscript itself. Few knew its name. Some called it Liber Veritatis, the Book of Truth. Others whispered the title with fear, as though speaking it aloud could call a curse upon them. There were no copies, no photographs, only fragments of rumor and the occasional scholar who vanished after speaking too freely about it. The manuscript was said to be unlike any document ever made. Its pages written in a language that defied translation, woven with symbols and diagrams no scholar could fully decipher. Maps of continents that should not exist. Genealogies that challenged every accepted history. Stories of time before time. Some believed it was a record of an ancient civilization, one that had existed before the dawn of recorded history. Others claimed it was a divine revelation, a truth too dangerous to speak, hidden away to protect humanity. And still others suggested something darker, that the manuscript contained knowledge not meant for mortal minds. This was no ordinary secret. It was a shadow over human history, a question buried in silence. What if everything we thought we knew about ourselves was a carefully crafted lie? What if the truth had been locked away and guarded ever since? The legend of the manuscript was not born in modern times. For centuries, references to it appeared in scattered texts, in the hidden writings of theologians, in letters burned before they could be published. There were hints in the records of the Inquisition, whispers in the margins of ancient codices, clues that pointed to a chronicle so dangerous it was erased from the memory of mankind. Some said the church's decision to hide it was not born of malice, but of fear of knowledge itself, knowledge that could dismantle faith, power, and the order of the world. Others said it was a deliberate act of control, a way to shape history by keeping certain truths hidden. Whatever the reason, the manuscript remained locked away, guarded not just by stone and steel, but by the weight of centuries. The Vatican claimed no such book existed. Scholars searched in vain, yet the whispers persisted, passed quietly between scholars, historians, and those willing to speak in shadows. Tonight, that silence will be challenged. Somewhere beyond the corridors of the Vatican, a scholar in secret possession of a fragment of the manuscript was about to reveal his discovery. He claimed to have unlocked a part of the code, a clue to a truth hidden for millennia. But before he could speak, he vanished without a trace. The air in the vault seemed to tighten, as if aware of what was contained there. A fear older than the church itself lingered in that place. A warning whispered across time. Some truths are not to be uncovered. Some doors are not meant to be opened. Yet history has a way of pulling us toward those forbidden doors. Curiosity, defiance, the search for truth, these are part of the human spirit. And somewhere, deep within the heart of the Vatican, that spirit waits. Silent, patient, and eternal. The candlelight dimmed. The guard shifted. Somewhere beyond the silence, the manuscript remained hidden, waiting for the moment the world would demand to know. And in that moment, the question would echo louder than ever. What truth was so dangerous it had to be erased forever? They call it the labyrinth, not just of stone, but of secrecy. The Vatican archives are a world unto themselves, a maze of endless corridors, hidden rooms, and shelves heavier than memory. Within this vast library of the Church, there are millions of documents, letters, codices, maps, some dating back 1,000 years. But there are whispers of something far older, something hidden beneath even the deepest shelves, the manuscript. Few have ever entered these archives. Fewer still have left knowing what they encountered. Entry is guarded not only by the rules of the Vatican, but by a code of silence. Scholars are vetted for years. Requests are denied without explanation. And those who speak too freely about what they find are swiftly removed from access or disappear entirely. The corridors themselves seem to breathe history. The air smells of old paper, ink, and stone. The light is always dim, the atmosphere hushed, as if the walls themselves are sworn to secrecy. In these archives, nothing is accidental. Every document, every scroll is part of a deliberate order, a system of knowledge and concealment. And somewhere in that order lies the truth about the manuscript. For centuries, scholars have spoken of it in half-formed whispers. Some call it legend, others call it obsession. But the name that appears most often in these hushed references is Liber Veritatis, the Book of Truth. Those who have claimed to glimpse its existence describe something unlike any other document in human history. Not just pages of ink, but something that seems alive, writing that shifts under the eye, symbols that change meaning, diagrams that defy logic. They speak of maps that do not match any known geography, genealogies that trace humanity to impossible origins, and prophecies that speak of a fate beyond time. The whispers are everywhere, in private letters between Vatican scholars, in the annotations of forbidden codices, in the margins of historical works erased centuries ago. There are references to a document so dangerous it had to be hidden and sealed within an inner vault accessible to none but a select few. These whispers form a strange pattern, an echo of something buried deep in the past. Some historians suggest the manuscript is not simply hidden, but deliberately erased from history. They point to centuries of destruction, libraries burned, texts purged, scholars silenced. The Inquisition was not just a movement of faith, but of erasure, and this manuscript seems to have been one of its greatest casualties. Yet the Vatican's archives still hold clues. References disguised as mundane entries, odd catalog numbers, and strange symbols hidden among ordinary works. Scholars who have studied these records speak of footprints of the manuscript, traces left as if to challenge the curious. It is as if the manuscript is both there and not there. A ghost in the archives, a shadow that has survived centuries of silence. And the more people search, the more elusive it becomes. The secrecy is not merely about preservation. It is about control. The Vatican, as keeper of one of the largest archives in the world, has always understood that knowledge is power. To hold knowledge is to hold history itself. And the manuscript, if it exists, could shift the very foundation of both. Theories about its disappearance abound. Some say it was hidden to protect humanity from its own destruction. Others believe it was concealed to protect the Church's authority. A more radical theory suggests that it was suppressed because it reveals truths that would dismantle not only religious faith, but the story of human existence itself. The search for the manuscript has drawn scholars into dangerous territory. Some have been dismissed from their positions. Others have been threatened. A few have simply vanished, leaving behind nothing but questions. Among these lost seekers is Father Lorenzo, a historian who spent a decade within the archives. His private notes, smuggled before his disappearance, hint at a discovery so profound it could rewrite history. But before he could speak of it, he vanished. His disappearance only deepened the mystery. Was it a warning, or proof that he had found something worth silencing? Those who knew him speak of his obsession with a phrase found in the margins of an ancient codex, a phrase that seemed to point toward the manuscript itself. The phrase remains untranslated. Some believe it to be a code. Others see it as a prophecy. Whatever it is, it has fueled the belief that the Vatican's archives hold not just history, but a secret that has shaped history itself. The labyrinth of the archives is more than a library. It is a living enigma, a place where every corner hides possibility and every silence hides a story. It is the perfect place to bury a secret so dangerous that no one could be allowed to speak of it. And yet, whispers persist. In conversations between scholars, in private correspondences, in dreams shared in secrecy, they speak of a manuscript that contains the hidden story of humanity, a story erased from memory, locked away by the Church, and guarded across centuries. For those who search for it, the archives are a maze without end. But for those who truly believe it exists, the search becomes an obsession. Because the manuscript is not simply a book. It is a doorway to truths we are not meant to know, to histories erased, to a reality that challenges everything we believe. And so the whispers continue. Quiet, persistent, unyielding, echoes of a secret that refuses to be buried. The question remains, if the manuscript exists, how did it survive centuries of purges and destruction? How could something so dangerous endure when empires, libraries, and centuries themselves have vanished? In the end, the answer may be locked deep within the Vatican's labyrinth, in a vault untouched by time, guarded by silence, and protected by faith. And somewhere, in the shadows of the archives, the manuscript waits. There's a shadow cast over the manuscript, a shadow that stretches across centuries. It is not merely the absence of the book itself, but the fragments, the whispers, the strange hints that remain. These fragments are scattered across history like pieces of an ancient puzzle, each one suggesting something far more profound than the manuscript alone. Some of these pieces have survived by accident, hidden within other works, disguised in codes, or embedded in forgotten corners of the Vatican archives. Others have been preserved in whispers, references in letters, veiled confessions in journals, or cryptic allusions in the writings of scholars long dead. Together, they form the shape of something far greater than any single document. The fragments suggest the manuscript is not a simple book, but a living chronicle, a record that defies time itself. They speak of impossible origins, genealogies stretching into eras before recorded history, maps of lands that no modern cartographer could recognize, and symbols that do not belong to any known language. One fragment describes a map unlike any other. It shows continents submerged beneath oceans, cities that predate civilization, and landscapes erased by time. Another fragment contains genealogies linking humanity to a line that predates any known species. Yet another hints at events so ancient they challenge the very timeline of human existence. The fragments themselves are a puzzle, each piece incomplete, each part whispering questions without answers. Yet taken together, they point towards something both terrifying and extraordinary, a chronicle that could rewrite the story of humanity itself. These fragments have never been gathered together in one place. They are locked away in fragments of ancient codices, tucked into margins of theological treatises, and hidden in manuscripts the Church considers too dangerous for study. To scholars who have dared to search, these fragments are both a map and a warning. The manuscript itself, as described in these fragments, is more than words. It is a labyrinth of knowledge, a record written in a language designed to conceal as much as it reveals, a living document that resists translation. Some scholars believe its very structure was designed as a safeguard, a way to protect its truths from falling into the wrong hands. The more scholars investigate, the more the fragments seem to suggest something extraordinary, that the manuscript was never meant to be found by accident. It was created to be discovered only by those prepared to understand it. And the Church, aware of this, may have dedicated centuries to guarding it for that very reason. But what is this truth? Why would it be so dangerous that it must be hidden from the world? The fragments give tantalizing hints, but no answers. One passage speaks of the origin before origin. Another warns of the knowledge that destroys the soul. Yet another claims the manuscript contains the lost memory of mankind. These fragments are not consistent. Some contradict one another. Some appear deliberately misleading, as if the manuscript itself is a puzzle designed to confuse, to protect itself. The fragments are like echoes of something immense, but only faint echoes, scattered and distorted by centuries of silence. The secrecy surrounding them adds to their power. There is no complete description of the manuscript, no reliable account of its content. Everything known comes from fragmentary references and secondhand reports. And yet, these fragments have persisted, passed down quietly among scholars, hidden in obscure references, and preserved in the shadows of history. Some have claimed these fragments are all that remains of the manuscript after centuries of suppression. Others believe the manuscript still exists intact, hidden in a place so secret that even the highest ranks of the Vatican are unaware of its location. There are whispers of a vault beneath the archives, guarded by rituals older than the Church itself, containing a text so dangerous it could collapse the foundations of human knowledge. These whispers have given rise to speculation and myth. Some call it a forbidden chronicle of human origins. Others speak of it as a divine revelation, hidden away to protect humanity from itself. Some even claim it is a document of prophecy, a record that not only tells the story of the past, but foresees the fate of the future. For centuries, the fragments have been both treasure and curse. Scholars who attempt to piece them together often vanish, as if the manuscript guards itself. Some believe this is not coincidence, but a deliberate protection, the manuscript itself acting as a silent guardian of its secrets. Yet despite the danger, the fragments continue to surface. Not all are found by scholars. Some appear in the margins of forgotten books, in private collections, or in the personal libraries of those who understood too much. Each fragment tells part of the story, a story of creation, of concealment, and of a truth so profound it cannot be revealed without consequence. And so the shadow of the manuscript grows. It is a shadow that haunts the Vatican archives, whispered in private conversations, hinted at in ancient marginalia, and hidden in fragments that refuse to be silenced. These fragments are the shadows of the manuscript story. They are the echoes of a truth so powerful, the world may not be ready to hear it. The question remains, if these fragments survive, if these whispers persist, what is the manuscript hiding? Is it simply a record of forgotten history? Or is it something far more dangerous? Something that could change everything we believe about ourselves? And so the search continues. Scholars study the fragments in silence, piecing together what they can. The Vatican remains silent. The corridors of the archives keep their secret, and the manuscript waits, its shadow stretching across centuries, its story unfinished, its truth still beyond reach. Because some truths are not meant to be found. Some secrets are preserved in shadow, and some manuscripts are guarded not by locks, but by silence. The fragments speak, but only in riddles. And in their whispers lies the question that drives every seeker. What lies in the shadow of the manuscript? And why must it remain hidden? Throughout history, the Church has not merely preserved knowledge, it has shaped it. For centuries, it maintained control over what could be read, what could be taught, and what could be questioned. This control was not simply a matter of faith, it was a matter of power. And nowhere was this more evident than in the long history of censorship. The Church's most infamous instrument of control was the Index Librorum Prohibitorum, the Index of Forbidden Books. Established in the 16th century, it listed works deemed heretical or dangerous. The list was long and sweeping, containing texts of science, philosophy, and religion. Books that challenged the Church's authority or contradicted doctrine were condemned. They were burned, banned, erased. Knowledge itself became a battleground. But this was not the first act of suppression. Centuries before the Index, the Church had already engaged in the systematic destruction of heretical works. Pagan texts, early Christian writings, philosophical treatises. Countless works vanished without a trace, their existence surviving only in the faintest references. The loss was immense, and in the gaps left behind, legends began to form. Among those lost texts, scholars whisper of one greater than all others, a manuscript so powerful that the Church would stop at nothing to guard it. If the Index was the Church's sword, this manuscript was the treasure it feared most. It was not simply knowledge. It was a challenge to the very foundation of authority. The manuscript's danger was not in blasphemy alone. It was in the possibility that its content could alter humanity's understanding of itself. To the Church, that was the gravest threat of all. For centuries, faith and history were intertwined. If one fell, the other could follow. And so, the manuscript became a secret too dangerous to reveal. Censorship was not merely an act of suppression. It was a deliberate rewriting of history. The Church shaped the record of human knowledge, deciding what would survive and what would vanish. And this was not done quietly. Trials, burnings, and public condemnations were the tools of control. The Inquisition became a symbol of this power, a reminder that knowledge could be silenced by force. The manuscript existed in the shadow of this history. Its suppression was not a singular event, but a continuing process, stretching across centuries. Every generation of the Church maintained the secrecy, passing it down as a guarded legacy. To speak of the manuscript was to challenge the authority of the Church itself. And for that reason, silence became the rule. Yet the suppression only fueled curiosity. Forbidden knowledge carries a power of its own. The very act of hiding something imbues it with mystery. Scholars began to speak of it in whispers, piecing together fragments of references scattered across time. In letters between theologians, in footnotes, in erased texts, in records of inquisitions. Hints of the manuscript persisted. Some suggest this secrecy created a paradox. By suppressing knowledge, the Church ensured that the manuscript's legend would grow. Every attempt to destroy it became part of the story. The more the manuscript was hidden, the more scholars and seekers were drawn to it. Its absence became proof of its importance. The history of censorship reveals a pattern. The Church's fear was not only of the content of certain works, but of the implications of knowledge itself. To hold knowledge is to hold power. And the manuscript, if real, was more than a book. It was the ultimate power. That fear explains why no one inside the Vatican speaks openly about it. The silence is deliberate. The absence of evidence is part of the protection. Even today, there are no official references to the manuscript, no public acknowledgement, only an unbroken silence that stretches back centuries. Yet those who have devoted themselves to its search insist it exists. They point to anomalies in the archives, missing catalogs, burned manuscripts, references that disappear mid-sentence. These are not accidents. They are traces of an erasure that was purposeful and sustained. This deliberate censorship is the reason the manuscript story is so dangerous. It is a story that defies the accepted narrative of history. To find it would not simply be to uncover a book. It would be to confront a force that history itself has tried to erase. The manuscript is a symbol of what the Church feared most: knowledge unbound by authority. For centuries, the Church maintained control over the truth. The moment that control is broken, everything changes. That is why the manuscript remains hidden, not just in stone vaults, but in silence. It is protected by centuries of deliberate erasure and secrecy. And it is the reason that those who seek it are drawn into a dangerous pursuit, a pursuit that is as much about uncovering history as it is about confronting the limits of knowledge itself. The deeper one studies the history of censorship, the clearer it becomes that this is not simply about a book. It is about control, faith, and fear. It is about the lengths to which those in power will go to protect a narrative. And it is about the danger that lies in uncovering what was meant to remain hidden. The manuscript exists in the shadow of censorship. It is the forbidden fruit of history, a story too powerful to be spoken, too dangerous to be forgotten. And for those who seek it, the question is not whether it exists, but whether they are prepared for the truth it holds. Because in the silence of the archives, the manuscript speaks in absence, and that silence may be its loudest warning of all. The story the manuscript hides begins before history itself, before written records, before civilization, before memory. It is said to contain a chronicle of origins unlike anything in Genesis or any other known scripture. A version of creation that challenges the foundation of human understanding. The fragments hint at a truth too dangerous to speak aloud, that humanity's beginning is far older, far stranger, and far more mysterious than any accepted history. The manuscript, they suggest, is not merely a record of events, but a chronicle of a forgotten time, a time when the world was shaped by forces unknown, and when humanity itself walked a path erased from memory. Some scholars believe the manuscript contains a record of ancient civilizations erased from history, cultures that existed long before the dawn of written word, whose knowledge was so vast it became a threat to those who came after. Others suggest it is a record of something even more extraordinary. The human origins are not bound to Earth, but to a story that transcends it. Within the fragments, there are references to places that do not exist on any modern map, names of cities that vanish from all other records, peoples whose genealogies defy explanation. Some of these names are whispered in the margins of ancient texts, carefully crossed out, as if someone tried to erase them from history entirely. One fragment speaks of the first dawn, a time when humanity emerged not from dust or divine breath, but from a lineage older than the stars. Another fragment describes the lost continent, a land that existed before memory, destroyed in cataclysm, yet preserved in the manuscript's memory. These are not just myths. They are recorded as if they were historical fact. The possibility is staggering. If true, it means the history of humanity has been rewritten. The story we have been told of creation of the first peoples, of the rise of civilization, could be incomplete, even deliberately altered. And the manuscript would be the key to that hidden chapter. Some suggest the church knew this and feared the consequences. For centuries, faith has rested upon a particular story of human origins. If that story were replaced, faith itself could be shaken. This is perhaps why the manuscript, if it exists, was hidden away, not destroyed, because knowledge cannot be completely erased, but concealed, guarded as a secret too dangerous to reveal. The fragments also hint at something even more unsettling, that humanity's memory of itself has been manipulated, that the past has been edited so thoroughly that the truth lies buried beneath layers of myth, scripture, and silence. This idea transforms the manuscript into more than a book. It becomes a mirror reflecting the fragility of history itself. Some scholars who have dared to study these fragments speak of a recurring theme, a warning embedded within the chronicle. That knowledge of the true origins of humanity carries a danger of its own, not just to belief systems, but to the survival of humanity itself. They speak of a story so powerful, so disruptive, that it could unravel the world as we know it. And this is what makes the manuscript so dangerous. It is not just the past it hides, but the power it could wield over the present and future. Knowledge is never neutral. The story of human origins is not merely academic. It shapes identity, faith, and destiny. To possess that story is to possess a kind of truth that could change everything. The fragments suggest the manuscript was written not as history alone, but as a record of memory, a chronicle intended to preserve a knowledge lost to time, a knowledge so profound it was hidden in plain sight, disguised in language and symbols designed to protect it from discovery. This was a book meant to survive, but only for those prepared to understand it. And so the manuscript remained hidden, carried across centuries by silence and secrecy. Every generation of guardians preserved it, aware that the truth it held was a burden as well as a treasure. A burden because truth carries consequences, and a treasure because truth is the foundation of understanding. The fragments themselves are proof that the manuscript exists, proof not in the form of the book itself, but in the shadows it casts across history. References in ancient writings, anomalies in archaeological records, and the persistent whispers of scholars who have glimpsed fragments of it. Some fragments point to a chronology so ancient it challenges every accepted timeline of human history. Others speak of a knowledge that could reshape not only history, but human consciousness itself. Together, they sketch a vision of origins that is both terrifying and beautiful, a story humanity may not yet be ready to hear. The danger of the manuscript lies in its promise, the promise that it could reveal the lost story of humanity, that it could tear away the veil of time and memory to reveal a truth erased by centuries of silence. And that is a truth powerful enough to terrify those who guard it. The question remains, if such a chronicle exists, how much of humanity's history has been hidden? How many truths have been lost, not to time, but to deliberate concealment? And why would such knowledge be locked away for centuries, hidden from the world? In the end, the manuscript is more than a book. It is a key to a forgotten past, a past that could redefine who we are. And that is why its existence is so fiercely denied, so carefully guarded. Because the story of origins is the story of humanity itself. To uncover it would be to look into the deepest part of ourselves, and to confront a truth that may change everything we believe about who we are and where we come from. Some secrets are protected by walls. Others are protected by silence. The Vatican's most dangerous secret is guarded by both. For centuries, the manuscript has existed in a realm beyond discovery, locked away not just in a physical vault, but in the collective memory of those sworn to protect it. Access to it is said to be restricted to an inner circle, a clandestine order within the Church that has remained hidden even from most of the Vatican hierarchy. They are the guardians of the Chronicle, scholars, theologians, and priests bound by an oath older than the modern Church itself. Their charge is not simply to preserve the manuscript, but to protect it from the world. Little is known about these guardians. They leave no record of their membership, their rituals, or their decisions. Even their existence is denied in official accounts. To speak of them is to invite suspicion. Yet scholars who have studied the Vatican's archives whisper of their presence, an unseen order dedicated to preserving knowledge too dangerous to be revealed. Some claim these guardians operate like keepers of a living code. They guard not only the manuscript itself, but the knowledge of how to interpret it. The manuscript, they say, is not written in a language that can be easily translated. Its words are bound in symbols, codes, and metaphors designed to conceal as much as they reveal. Without the knowledge passed down through generations of guardians, the manuscript remains incomprehensible. This secrecy is deliberate. The manuscript's protectors understand that knowledge is power, and that the wrong hands could use it for purposes beyond imagination. For centuries, this order has been the silent shield between the world and what the manuscript contains. They operate in the shadows, unseen yet constant, preserving both the text and the vow of silence. The existence of these guardians is hinted at in fragments scattered through history. Some appear in obscure writings in the margins of ancient texts. Others are preserved in cryptic references buried in church records. There are even those who claim to have seen them, brief glimpses of cloaked figures moving silently through the Vatican at night. But no proof has ever emerged. This hidden order is not merely a matter of tradition. It is part of a larger purpose. To guard the manuscript is to guard a truth so dangerous it could unsettle faith, identity, and history itself. They are aware that the moment this secret is revealed, everything changes. And so they remain silent, invisible, eternal. The guardians operate on a principle older than the Church itself, that certain knowledge cannot be released without consequence. The manuscript is more than history. It is a chronicle of power, a record that could alter the foundations of belief. And to guard such power is to carry a burden beyond measure. Yet the secrecy has created its own mystery. For centuries, the idea of this hidden order has become part of the manuscript's legend. Some scholars argue that the existence of the guardians is proof that the manuscript is real. Others claim it is a myth designed to protect the Church's power. But the persistence of the story suggests something deeper, a truth hidden beneath layers of secrecy. The manuscript and its guardians are bound together in a paradox. The manuscript exists in secrecy, and secrecy gives it power. To find it is to confront not just a book, but a history of concealment. Every generation of guardians has passed down the duty to protect it, and in doing so, has added to the mystery surrounding it. The Vatican's archives are more than a repository of documents. They are a labyrinth of hidden corridors and concealed rooms. Within them, the manuscript may rest, but only for those permitted to find it. The guardians know where it is hidden, and that knowledge has never been entrusted to outsiders. Some scholars believe the manuscript's location has shifted over centuries, that it moves like a living secret, hidden from discovery, protected by layers of code and ritual. Others suggest that its concealment is not physical but symbolic, that to find it is to pass a test of understanding, and only those prepared to comprehend its truth will be able to unlock it. The guardians themselves are the embodiment of this belief. They are not simply protectors of a book, but of a truth that demands careful stewardship. To them, the manuscript is not an object to be possessed, but a responsibility to be borne. It is the greatest secret in history, and its guardians have sworn to protect it at all costs. This is the shadow in which the manuscript lives. It is hidden not just by stone walls, but by vows, by silence, and by generations of careful guardianship. It is a secret kept so tightly that even the highest levels of the church may never know its resting place. And that is the final layer of the mystery. If the manuscript exists, it has never been lost. It has been kept, hidden in plain sight, guarded by those sworn to protect it. A truth preserved in shadow. The question is not whether the manuscript exists. The question is whether the world is ready to know it. Because once a secret like this is revealed, there is no returning to ignorance. The guardians know this, and so they remain in silence, watching, protecting, as the manuscript waits in the darkness. For centuries, the Vatican's secret has lived in the margins of history, glimpsed only in fragments, hinted at in erased manuscripts, whispered in corridors no one dares to name. But the trail of the manuscript is not simply hidden in silence. It is hidden in riddles, in symbols scattered across centuries of human record. These riddles are not accidents. They are deliberate markers, designed to conceal and reveal at the same time. The manuscript, if it exists, was written not to be read by everyone, but to be understood by the few prepared to decipher it. Its code is woven into the fabric of history itself. Scholars who have studied these traces speak of patterns, recurring symbols that appear in ancient texts across cultures and eras. Symbols that, when studied together, suggest a narrative hidden beneath the surface of recorded history. They speak of a story of humanity that runs deeper than archaeology, deeper than scripture, deeper than memory itself. One of the most persistent clues lies in the language described in the fragments. It is said to be unlike any known tongue, a language not just of words, but of ideas encoded in symbols, geometry, and sound. Some scholars call it the language of memory itself, a system designed to carry knowledge beyond the limits of time. The manuscript's language, they say, was meant to protect its content. It is a living code, changing in meaning as understanding evolves. To read, it is not merely to translate words, but to unlock layers of thought embedded within the structure of the manuscript itself. These symbols are not confined to one culture or time. They appear in the carvings of forgotten temples, in the geometry of ancient cities, in the designs of sacred objects. Some have argued that this is evidence the manuscript contains knowledge from a civilization older than recorded history, a knowledge so ancient it became part of humanity's collective memory. The fragments point toward a pattern, a hidden narrative woven into human history. This narrative speaks of origins erased from the record, of a knowledge so profound that it was buried intentionally. The manuscript becomes not just a chronicle of events, but a key to understanding why history itself has been shaped the way it is. But the trail of the manuscript is perilous. Those who have sought to decipher its clues have faced resistance. Access to relevant documents has been denied. Scholars have been silenced. Records have been altered or destroyed. The deeper one digs, the more obstacles appear. Some believe this resistance is part of the manuscript's protection, that it is guarded not only by those sworn to silence, but by the very nature of the code itself, that the manuscript chooses who may approach it, and in doing so, it preserves its truth for those prepared to bear it. The search for these clues has drawn scholars into dangerous territory. Some have devoted their lives to tracing these symbols, traveling to hidden libraries, studying marginal notes, and decoding fragments. But the deeper they go, the more elusive the manuscript becomes. Each discovery leads to more questions. Each clue opens another door of mystery. The history of these clues is itself a story of concealment. From the ancient libraries of Alexandria to the monasteries of medieval Europe, fragments of this code have survived in unexpected places. The pattern has persisted across centuries, hidden within texts the world believed were lost. It is as if the manuscript has left a breadcrumb trail through history, a puzzle meant to be solved. This trail suggests a startling possibility, that the manuscript was never truly lost, that it has been guiding humanity's search for itself, hidden in plain sight, its knowledge scattered across cultures and eras, that its secrecy is not a failure of preservation, but a deliberate design. Some scholars propose that the manuscript is a kind of living archive, a record that evolves with humanity's understanding. Its code adapts, reshapes, conceals, and reveals, depending on who seeks it. This would explain why so many who have approached it without preparation have failed to find it. The idea that the manuscript is a living code transforms the search into something more than archaeology or scholarship. It becomes a quest for a deeper understanding of reality itself. It is a pursuit not just of history, but of meaning. And meaning, in this case, carries a weight beyond any book. The manuscript, if it exists, is not merely a record of the past. It is a statement about the nature of truth and the lengths humanity will go to protect, alter, or conceal it. The symbols, the fragments, the silence, they are all part of the same mystery. They speak of something hidden beneath the surface of human history, something preserved in shadow, waiting to be uncovered by those who understand how to read the signs. But to reach that truth is not simple. It requires more than curiosity. It demands persistence, patience, and the willingness to confront dangers, both intellectual and physical. It is a journey into a labyrinth where knowledge itself is the prize and the threat. The trail of the manuscript is a path paved with riddles. Every clue leads deeper into mystery. Every discovery raises more questions. And at the heart of it all lies the question that drives every seeker. What is the manuscript hiding, and why does it matter so much? Because the manuscript is not just a book. It is a key to a deeper truth. And those who follow its trail are not merely searching for knowledge. They're searching for the origin of the story of humanity itself. The deeper you look into the trail of the manuscript, the more you encounter a strange truth. Its story is entwined not only with secrecy, but with betrayal. For centuries, those closest to its knowledge have faced choices that tested their loyalty, their faith, and their very understanding of truth. Throughout history, there have been whispers of scholars, priests, and even cardinals who have sought the manuscript, not to guard it, but to possess it. These seekers were not merely driven by curiosity. They were driven by the promise of power, the power that comes with knowledge no one else holds. The stakes of possession were enormous. The manuscript is said to contain not only the history of humanity, but the keys to controlling it, knowledge that could alter belief, redefine authority, and change the course of human destiny. And such a prize inevitably breeds ambition, envy, and betrayal. One of the earliest recorded betrayals linked to the manuscript dates to the early Renaissance. A scholar within the Vatican, driven by obsession, is said to have discovered a fragment of the chronicle. He believed it contained a truth that could elevate him above the Church's authority. Yet before he could speak of it, his name vanished from the records, his writings erased. Some say he was silenced. Others claim he was taken into the labyrinth of the archives and never seen again. Betrayal is not confined to history. In a modern age, the search for the manuscript has drawn a new kind of danger, one that operates not only in secrecy, but in political intrigue. Scholars who have spoken of their search quietly disappear. Research projects into forbidden fragments are shut down. Access to archives is revoked without explanation. The trail grows cold, yet the suspicion of betrayal grows hotter. Some suggest that the Church itself has seen betrayal as the greatest threat to the manuscript. This is why secrecy is maintained not only by silence, but by a web of surveillance and loyalty tests. Those who are allowed to approach its trail are chosen carefully and their motives questioned. Even within the Vatican, access is granted only after proof of trust, and even then, only to a select few. There are stories of internal factions, groups within the Church with conflicting visions of what to do with the manuscript if it were found. Some argue it should be revealed as the greatest truth humanity could possess. Others believe it should remain hidden to protect faith and order. This internal division itself has created a hidden war, fought not in open conflict but in silence, in decisions made in the corridors of power. This is a betrayal not just of trust, but of history itself. To conceal the manuscript is to alter the course of memory. Those who guard it become both protectors and wardens, deciding which parts of history are revealed and which are erased. In that choice lies the ultimate betrayal, the choice to control the past in order to shape the future. Some scholars argue that the manuscript's history of betrayal is part of its nature, that it was created in an age where knowledge was power and power was fragile, that its survival depended not only on secrecy but on sacrifice, and betrayal became an unavoidable part of its preservation. The betrayals tied to the manuscript are more than political maneuvering. They are moral challenges. To possess, it is to carry a burden, the burden of knowing something humanity may not be ready to hear. And to protect, it is to bear the weight of that knowledge in silence. Throughout history, the manuscript has survived because of both loyalty and betrayal. Guardians have preserved it, but seekers have tried to claim it. Betrayals have erased paths to it, but they have also revealed fragments of its existence. In this interplay lies the manuscript's most dangerous allure, the idea that it is worth the cost of trust and truth. Some of the most compelling betrayals are those that remain hidden. There are accounts of scholars who claim to have found pieces of the manuscript but never published them. Others are said to have destroyed fragments rather than risk the truth falling into the wrong hands. These acts of concealment and destruction are betrayals in their own right, choices that shape the manuscript's fate as much as any discovery. The deeper one follows this history, the clearer it becomes that betrayal is woven into the manuscript's story. It is not an anomaly, but a constant, a shadow that has followed it through centuries of silence. Betrayal is not merely a danger to the manuscript. It is part of the reason it exists at all, and that is what makes its trail so dangerous. For every fragment uncovered, there is the risk that trust will be broken, that those who seek it will become both seekers and betrayers. In this way, The manuscript becomes not just a chronicle of origins, but a story of human ambition, faith, and the fragility of truth. The betrayals surrounding it are a warning. That knowledge is never neutral. It changes those who possess it. It shapes those who seek it. And the path to truth is always shadowed by choices that can either preserve or destroy it. The manuscript lives in this tension between knowledge and secrecy, faith and ambition, loyalty and betrayal. To follow its trail is to enter a world where every discovery carries a cost, and every truth demands a choice. And that is the paradox of the manuscript. It is both a treasure and a threat. The deeper the pursuit, the greater the danger. The more it is sought, the more it slips away. Because betrayal is not merely an act of deception. It is the price of guarding the greatest secret in history. And the manuscript's greatest secret may be that it cannot survive without it. By the final decade of the 20th century, the search for Alexander's tomb had become something more than an archaeological quest. It had become a global enigma, tangled in politics, pride, and secrecy. What began as the dream of conquerors and kings was now pursued by scientists armed with satellites and ground-penetrating radar, each hoping to lift the veil on one of history's most enduring mysteries. The world had grown smaller, but the secret of Alexander's resting place had only deepened. It seemed as though every layer of progress revealed a new layer of silence beneath it. In the 1990s, Egypt entered a new golden era of excavation. Under the leadership of ambitious scholars like Dr. Zahi Hawass, the country's archaeological frontiers expanded dramatically. The Valley of the Kings yielded fresh wonders. Ancient tombs reopened to breathe the desert air again. Yet in Alexandria, a different energy stirred, one not of discovery, but of restraint. The modern city was now densely built, its ancient core buried beneath centuries of concrete and commerce. Every excavation permit became a matter of politics. Every rumor of an ancient find drew immediate scrutiny from both the Egyptian government and foreign institutions. To search for Alexander was to navigate not only sand and stone, but bureaucracy, diplomacy, and quiet resistance. The most prominent figure to reignite the quest was Greek archaeologist Liana Savoltsi. In 1995, after years of research, she announced to the world that she had found Alexander's tomb, not in Alexandria, but in the Siwa oasis far west of the Nile. Her claim electrified the media. The site contained a grand Hellenistic structure adorned with Macedonian motifs and Greek inscriptions referring to the son of Zeus Ammon. Savoltsi declared confidently that the tomb matched descriptions in ancient texts. But her announcement came at a sensitive moment in Egyptian-Greek relations. Cairo's Ministry of Antiquities quickly intervened, halting her excavation and accusing her of overstepping authority. Her research permits were revoked. The find was sealed off, and official statements downplayed its significance. What followed was a storm of accusations and academic silence. Savoltsi insisted she had been suppressed, that her discovery threatened national pride and international politics. "They don't want the world to know," she said in a televised interview, "because whoever holds Alexander's tomb holds a piece of history's soul." The controversy split the academic community. Some dismissed her claims as speculative. Others whispered that she had come too close to something real. Reports surfaced that Egyptian authorities quietly continued limited investigations of the Siwa site for several years, away from cameras. No definitive results were ever published. To this day, the complex remains officially unidentified. Those satellite images show continued structural preservation. It was as if the sands themselves had been ordered to keep the secret. Meanwhile, in Alexandria proper, technology opened new doors. The city's coastline, long eroded by earthquakes and tsunamis, became a focus of marine archaeologists who used sonar and robotic submersibles to scan the submerged royal quarter, the same area where Cleopatra's palace once stood. French archaeologist Frank Gaudio led the effort, uncovering massive statues, sphinxes, and the ruins of temples once dedicated to Isis and Osiris. Beneath the waves, the outlines of an ancient city emerged like a ghostly reflection. Yet even as diverse documented hundreds of relics, one thing remained absent: any trace of the Soma, the royal mausoleum. Gaudio himself admitted that if Alexander's tomb had once stood there, it had either collapsed beneath deeper strata or been moved long ago. "We are looking," he said, "for a shadow in a sea of shadows." But the modern age brought with it something new: conspiracy and information control. As Egypt modernized and foreign interests surged, excavation data became increasingly restricted. Leaked documents and unofficial footage began circulating online, showing chambers uncovered during infrastructure projects in downtown Alexandria. The pursuit of the manuscript has led scholars and seekers down paths that are as dangerous as they are mysterious. For centuries, fragments of its story have appeared in the most unexpected places: in hidden libraries, in forbidden texts, in the ruins of civilizations erased from history. These traces form a hidden map, pointing towards something greater than history itself. One of the most compelling clues comes from the architecture of sacred spaces. Across continents and centuries, researchers have discovered recurring patterns, structures built with proportions and alignments that echo the symbols found in the manuscript's fragments. These are not isolated coincidences. They suggest an intentional design, a code embedded in stone and space. In ancient temples from Egypt to Mesopotamia, in cathedrals of Europe, in the ruins of civilizations that predate written language, these symbols appear again and again. The geometry of these spaces speaks of a knowledge lost to time, a knowledge preserved not in words but in form. Some scholars call this the geometry of memory, the language of the manuscript written in stone. This idea transforms the search for the manuscript into something far greater. It is no longer a matter of finding a book. It is a matter of deciphering a hidden architecture of truth built into the world itself. To follow its trail is to walk through history as if through a labyrinth designed to conceal its deepest secret. The patterns found in architecture suggest that the manuscript's knowledge was never meant to be contained in a single volume alone. It was meant to be preserved in multiple forms, in buildings, in symbols, in ritual. The manuscript was one part of a larger system of memory, a system designed to survive through ages of change and erasure. Some scholars have taken this idea further. They suggest that the manuscript was part of an ancient tradition, a living archive passed down through generations, encoded in multiple mediums so that no single catastrophe could erase it. This would explain why fragments of the manuscript code appear across different cultures, languages, and religions. This cross-cultural presence is itself a mystery. The symbols and structures appear in places with no known connection to one another, in civilizations separated by centuries and continents. How could such knowledge survive, if not through deliberate preservation? And what does it mean about the origins of that knowledge? The fragments hint that the manuscript's knowledge predates recorded history, that it comes from a time before language as we know it, when knowledge was carried in patterns, symbols, and memory. This is why its code appears in architecture, because architecture itself is a form of preserved knowledge, a language of form and proportion. The manuscript, then, becomes more than a book. It becomes part of a living architecture, a network of knowledge hidden in plain sight. Its traces are scattered across history, preserved in stone, in ritual, and in the silent traditions of those who guard it. But this architecture of memory is not open to all. To understand, it requires a way of seeing beyond the obvious. It requires knowledge of the code itself, knowledge that has been guarded and passed down in secrecy. This is part of the danger of the manuscript. It is not merely knowledge, but a method of knowing. To decode this method is to step into a hidden history, one that challenges everything we think we know about the past. It is a history not written in words alone, but in the very fabric of our world. And it is a history that the manuscript may contain in full. The search for the manuscript through architecture has led to discoveries that challenge conventional archaeology. Sites once thought to be unrelated now reveal patterns that suggest a hidden order, a unity of design that points to something beyond coincidence. Some scholars believe these patterns are the manuscript's signature, a hidden language meant to lead seekers to the truth. But this pursuit is perilous. The more one follows these architectural clues, the deeper one enters the labyrinth. Each discovery raises more questions, and each answer leads to another mystery. The manuscript becomes less a destination and more a journey, a labyrinth of knowledge that tests those who seek it. And there is another danger. The deeper the pursuit, the more those who guard the manuscript respond. Access to sites is restricted. Records are sealed. Scholars disappear. The trail is not simply hidden. It is defended, often with secrecy as powerful as the knowledge itself. This defense suggests that the manuscript's truth is not only dangerous to history, but to the present. If its knowledge is a language embedded in the world itself, then to uncover it is to change the way we see reality. It is not simply a historical revelation, but a transformation of perception. That is why the manuscript has been hidden in the architecture of memory. It is hidden not just in words, but in form, in proportion, in geometry, so that only those prepared to read it may find it. And to read, it is to awaken something older than history, something that has survived centuries of silence. The search for this hidden architecture is the search for the manuscript itself. It is the pursuit of a truth so profound that it has been concealed not in a single book, but in the world itself. And it is a pursuit that demands more than knowledge. It demands vision. Because the manuscript is not merely a record of history. It is a living code, a map written in stone, and the architecture of memory is its language. To follow that architecture is to follow the path of the greatest secret in history. And that path leads into a labyrinth from which there may be no return. The deeper the trail leads, the more it becomes clear that the manuscript is not just a book. It is a living memory woven into the traditions, symbols, and secrets of humanity. And nowhere is this more evident than in the myths that surround human origins, myths that repeat across cultures with uncanny similarity. These myths, scholars argue, are not simply stories. They are echoes of memory, fragments of an ancient truth preserved in narrative. They speak of beginnings lost to time, of civilizations before history, and of knowledge too dangerous to speak aloud. Across continents, these tales carry a recurring theme, that humanity's origin is not a beginning, but a return. From the creation myths of Mesopotamia to the cosmogonies of ancient Greece, from the sacred texts of India to the legends of the Americas, there are striking parallels. Many speak of a golden age, a time when humans lived in harmony with a higher knowledge, a knowledge now forgotten. Others speak of a great catastrophe that erased this knowledge from memory. The manuscript's fragments suggest that these myths are not separate stories, but variations of a single hidden chronicle. They hint at a collective memory, preserved in myth, that contains the same knowledge the manuscript protects. This raises a staggering possibility that myths themselves may be fragments of the manuscript. If true, this would mean the manuscript is not a single volume hidden away, but a living tradition encoded in human culture. Its language is not confined to parchment, but exists in the myths, rituals, and symbols passed down through generations. Myths are not fabrications. They are memory in disguise. The implications are profound. It means the manuscript is not a discovery in a vault, but something humanity carries within itself. It is hidden not only in stone or scripture, but in the collective unconscious. To find it is not simply to open a book, but to awaken a memory older than history itself. Scholars studying these parallels have uncovered startling coincidences. The same symbolic motifs, the serpent, the tree of knowledge, the great flood, the lost city, appear in myths across cultures separated by geography and time. These motifs are not random. They are the recurring language of a forgotten chronicle. Some suggest this language is the manuscript's code, that the myths themselves are fragments of the manuscript's truth, encoded so deeply in culture that they survive centuries without direct transmission. This would explain why the manuscript has never been found in full, because it exists in pieces scattered throughout the human story. This makes the search for the manuscript not just a matter of archaeology, but a journey through myth. To trace its fragments is to follow the echoes of a memory buried in the stories humanity has told itself for millennia. And it is to confront the possibility that history is not linear, but cyclical, a pattern repeating through time. The myths connected to the manuscript suggest a truth both beautiful and terrifying, that humanity is not the first to have existed in this form, that our origins stretch beyond a written record, beyond known history, into a time when memory itself was different. The manuscript becomes not a history book, but a chronicle of remembrance. The idea that myths contain the manuscript's truth challenges the way history is studied. It suggests that history is not something written only in texts and artifacts, but something living, carried in memory, myth, and culture. The manuscript's fragments are the threads of that living memory. This is why the manuscript has been so fiercely guarded. If its truth is preserved in myth, then revealing the manuscript would be to strip away the veil that protects that memory. It would change not only history, but the stories humanity tells itself. And such a revelation carries consequences beyond comprehension. The myths hint at something even more profound, that the manuscript's truth is not merely about the past, but about the future. That to remember is to awaken. That the knowledge within the manuscript could change not just how humanity understands its origins, but how it understands itself. Some scholars believe that this is why the manuscript has been concealed for so long, because it is not just knowledge. It is a key to awakening a memory humanity may not be ready to face. To reveal it without readiness is to risk destabilizing the foundations of human identity. The myths are the manuscript's echo. They are not the whole story, but fragments, reminders that the chronicle exists. They are whispers from the past, guiding seekers toward a truth too dangerous to speak aloud, yet too important to ignore. And that is the heart of the mystery. The manuscript is hidden in silence, guarded in secrecy, yet its story lives in the myths humanity carries. To uncover it is not just to find a book, but to confront the living memory of humanity itself. This is the paradox of the manuscript. It is hidden not only in a vault, but in the stories humanity tells. To find it is to look into the depths of history and into the depths of ourselves. Because myths are not just stories. They are the remnants of memory. And memory is the key to the manuscript's greatest secret. The deeper we move into the manuscript's shadow, the more the question emerges: who decided it should be hidden? To answer that is to step into a story of power, faith, and the shaping of history itself. The manuscript's guardians, whatever their true nature, were not chosen by chance. They were chosen because the secret it contains was deemed too dangerous for the world. This decision, to conceal rather than reveal, was not a simple act. It was a choice made at the intersection of faith and fear. For centuries, the Church has held a profound understanding of the power of knowledge. It understood that some truths, once revealed, could change the very foundation of belief. And perhaps the manuscript contains such a truth. The guardians, according to fragmented records, emerged not long after the manuscript itself vanished from public view. Their formation is lost to history, but hints of their existence appear in obscure documents, veiled references to a silent order entrusted with preserving the chronicle. This order operated in the shadows, beyond even the awareness of many within the Vatican. The reasons for their secrecy are still debated. Some scholars argue it was a matter of preserving faith, protecting believers from truths that might shatter their spiritual foundation. Others suggest it was a matter of preserving control, ensuring that knowledge powerful enough to alter history could not fall into the wrong hands. What is clear is that the decision to guard the manuscript was not made lightly. It was a choice made at the highest levels of power, a choice that has echoed across centuries. To hide, it was to decide that humanity was not yet ready to carry its truth. This choice carries its own moral weight. To conceal knowledge is to decide what humanity may or may not be able to handle. It is to decide who has the right to the truth. For the guardians, this was a burden as great as the manuscript itself. They became not just protectors of a book, but arbiters of human destiny. The manuscript's history of concealment is intertwined with history itself. The guardians have operated in ways that shaped events, though their influence remains unseen. They have guided access to knowledge, determined what could be preserved, and decided what must be erased. In this way, the manuscript has not only been hidden, it has shaped the very history it records. This brings us to one of the manuscript's deepest mysteries. If it is a chronicle of human origins, who holds the authority to decide whether it is revealed? For centuries, this authority has been vested in the guardians, but the question remains, by what right? The answer may lie in the manuscript itself. Some fragments suggest that the chronicle contains not only knowledge of the past, but a principle of stewardship, a code that dictates how and when it may be revealed. This would mean that the guardians are not self-appointed protectors, but chosen by the manuscript's own design. If this is true, then the manuscript is not only a book, but a living trust with its own rules for preservation. The guardians are its stewards, bound by an oath older than the Church itself, sworn to preserve the secret until the time is right. But that time, if it comes, remains unknown. The secrecy surrounding the manuscript has also created its own danger. To guard it is to hold power, and power invites corruption. There are accounts of internal conflicts among the guardians themselves, disagreements over whether to reveal the manuscript or continue its concealment. These disputes are whispered about in the margins of Vatican history, never confirmed, never denied. Some believe these conflicts explain why the manuscript has remained hidden for so long, not merely because of the danger of its truth, but because there is no consensus on what should be done with it. To reveal it is to change the world. To conceal, it is to deny humanity the chance to know itself. The guardian silence is both protection and punishment. It protects the world from knowledge humanity may not yet be ready to bear. But it also denies humanity the possibility of understanding its own origins. This silence is a form of control, a choice made in the name of preservation, but one that carries consequences for every generation. History shows that secrecy is fragile. Over centuries, fragments of the manuscript's trail have been discovered, debated, and hidden again. Each discovery raises the question anew. What would happen if the manuscript were revealed? Would humanity embrace the truth or reject it? Would it unite us or divide us further? The Guardians have lived with this question for centuries. Their oath is not merely to protect the manuscript, but to decide the moment humanity is ready to face it. This is their burden, their mission, and their curse. And this is why the manuscript remains hidden today, not because it has been lost, but because it has been guarded by those who believe they know when and how the truth should be revealed. But history is never still. Secrets do not remain hidden forever. The path of the manuscript is not closed. Its trail remains, waiting for those who can follow it. The question is whether the world will be ready when it is found. The choice to reveal or conceal is not just a question for the Guardians. It is a question for all of humanity. And the manuscript, the greatest secret in history, holds the answer. Because to guard the manuscript is to guard a truth that could change everything. And to reveal it is to change history itself. The search for the manuscript is not merely a scholarly pursuit. It is a journey that blurs the line between history and obsession. For centuries, those who have sought it have become entangled in a quest that demands more than intellect. It demands a surrender to the mystery itself. Among the most enigmatic chapters of this quest are the accounts of seekers who have disappeared without a trace. They vanish not in war or exile, but in silence. The record of their journeys ends in whispered rumors, fragments of letters, marginal notes in hidden libraries, hints of encounters that can never be verified. These disappearances are not accidents. They are part of the manuscript's shadow, the cost of seeking a truth that was never meant to be uncovered. Some scholars call it the manuscript's price. Others call it the curse of revelation. Whatever the name, it is a warning repeated throughout the centuries. The danger of the manuscript is not only the knowledge it contains, but the transformation it brings to those who seek it. The pursuit of the chronicle changes seekers. It alters their perception of history, of memory, and of themselves. For some, it becomes an obsession. For others, it becomes a burden too great to bear. One of the most famous cases is that of Father Lorenzo di Ricci, a 17th century scholar whose studies of obscure Vatican fragments brought him dangerously close to the manuscript's trail. His notes speak of visions and dreams that he claimed came from the manuscript itself, a language of light and geometry that no human tongue could translate. Then one night he vanished. His papers disappeared, and the records of his work were sealed. His fate remains one of history's unanswered questions. This pattern repeats through history. Seekers drawn into the manuscript's shadow often report similar experiences. Inexplicable visions, a sense of being followed, a compulsion to protect or destroy the knowledge they have glimpsed. Some disappear without warning. Others return, changed. And in both cases, their accounts add to the legend of the manuscript. These disappearances have given rise to stories of a curse, whispered among scholars and seekers. But there is another way to interpret them. Perhaps the danger is not supernatural, but human. Perhaps it is the manuscript itself, the knowledge it contains, that exacts this price. To approach it is to confront something beyond human comprehension, and that confrontation leaves a mark. The manuscript's trail has become a test, a gauntlet that only the most determined or the most willing to sacrifice can pass. This is why its seekers are drawn into a labyrinth of danger, both intellectual and physical. Every step closer to the truth brings them deeper into peril. For some, the manuscript price is their career, their reputation, or their safety. For others, it is their sanity. Scholars have spoken of losing themselves in the pursuit, of becoming consumed by fragments, symbols, and visions. The search becomes not a journey for knowledge, but a journey into the self. This danger is part of the manuscript's power. It is not simply a book or a chronicle. It is a force that reshapes those who seek it. It is said that the manuscript tests the seeker, revealing not only the truth of history, but the truth of the seeker's own nature. The disappearances are a warning. They speak of a cost that cannot be measured in years or possessions, but in something deeper, the loss of certainty. To seek the manuscript is to surrender certainty, to step into a realm where truth is elusive and the past is never fully revealed. This is why so few pursue the trail for long. The path of the manuscript is not a path of glory, but a path of sacrifice. It demands that seekers give more than they receive, and it demands that they accept that some truths may never be theirs to hold. The manuscript's price also speaks to the nature of knowledge itself. True knowledge is not passive. It does not arrive without consequence. To seek it is to change the seeker, and the manuscript, in its silence and secrecy, preserves its truth not only by hiding it, but by testing those who would uncover it. The disappearances of seekers are part of the manuscript's story. They are warnings, legends, and mysteries rolled into one. They are reminders that the pursuit of truth is never without danger. And they are proof that the manuscript is more than a chronicle. It is a force that shapes history, even in absence. But there is another layer to this danger. The manuscript's trail suggests that those who disappear are not always lost. There are accounts, whispered in secret, of seekers who vanish, only to return changed, carrying fragments of knowledge too dangerous to speak aloud. These returnees add another dimension to the legend, that the manuscript may test seekers not by their failure, but by their transformation. And that transformation is perhaps the manuscript's greatest mystery, because it suggests that the pursuit of the chronicle is not simply a quest for knowledge, but a journey of awakening. To follow the trail is to walk toward a truth that cannot be held, only lived. This is the paradox of the manuscript's danger. It is both a warning and an invitation. To seek it is to risk everything, but to ignore it is to deny the possibility of understanding a truth older than history itself. And so the seekers continue to follow the trail, drawn by a force they cannot name, a force that has carried them through centuries of silence, betrayal, and sacrifice. They follow the manuscript's path into the unknown, into the labyrinth where knowledge and danger meet. Because in the end, the manuscript is not a book. It is a test. And those who follow its trail are tested not by the truth they find, but by what they are willing to lose to find it. The manuscript has always been silent, but silence is not absence. In that silence lies a pulse, a rhythm that echoes through centuries, felt by those who come close to its mystery. It calls not with words, but with presence, with the subtle gravity of something that refuses to be forgotten. There are whispers that one person, perhaps only one in each generation, is chosen to become its keeper. Not a guardian in the sense of ownership, but a custodian of balance, someone who ensures that the knowledge contained within does not fall into hands that would misuse it. The keeper does not claim the manuscript. The manuscript claims the keeper. No one knows how the choosing happens. Some say it begins with dreams, symbols that repeat night after night until waking life feels like a continuation of sleep. Others say it happens through lineage, passed down quietly through families whose names never appear in history books. There are even those who believe the keeper is not human at all, but something that moves through time, wearing different faces, speaking through chosen voices, carrying the same purpose across generations. Every legend agrees on one thing. The keeper's silence is sacred. The manuscript reveals itself only to those who understand the weight of stillness, who can hear the truth between the spaces of sound. Words can lie, but silence never does. That is the first lesson every keeper must learn. In the quiet hours of the night, when the world is wrapped in sleep, the keeper listens. Not for voices, not for messages, but for the rhythm beneath reality. The same rhythm that once guided ancient civilizations, that hums beneath deserts and oceans, that whispers through the turning of the stars. The manuscript is said to vibrate with that same rhythm. It is not a document of ink and paper alone. It is a resonance, a frequency of memory. Some scholars who have studied fragments of the manuscript describe patterns too deliberate to be random. Geometric alignments that correspond to celestial events, cycles of light and shadow recorded across time. These patterns seem to anticipate movement, as if the manuscript were alive, growing and shifting with the ages. The keeper, then, becomes its interpreter not through translation, but through alignment, by attuning themselves to the same frequency that binds the manuscript to the universe. There are stories of keepers seen at thresholds, between temples and ruins, between past and present, always watching, never interfering. They appear when the manuscript is threatened, and when balance begins to tilt toward chaos. Some say they protect the world from knowledge too early revealed. Others believe they protect the manuscript from humanity's impatience. Whatever the truth, their presence is both a warning and a promise that some mysteries are not meant to be solved, only safeguarded. One such account tells of a monastery hidden in the mountains of Anatolia, where a hooded figure appeared during a violent storm in the 12th century. The monks recorded that he carried a single parchment wrapped in dark cloth and that he spoke only once. This is not to be read. It is to be remembered. When dawn came, the figure was gone, leaving behind only silence and an empty seat in the monastery's library. Centuries later, that seat remains unoccupied. The manuscript's silence is not a void but a boundary. It marks the edge of what can be known, a veil between human understanding and something greater. Every keeper understands this boundary. They do not seek to cross it. They protect it, because beyond that line lies not enlightenment, but dissolution, the unraveling of the self that comes from facing truth too vast for words. It is said that those who break the keeper's silence are consumed by it. Their voices vanish from history, their writings fade, their names are lost. This vanishing is not punishment, but equilibrium. The manuscript restoring the balance that human curiosity so often disrupts. For knowledge, like fire, must be held carefully. Too much light blinds. In modern times, traces of the keeper's presence persist. A photograph from 1922 shows an archaeologist standing beside a newly unearthed chamber, his face obscured by motion blur, while every other figure in the frame is perfectly still. The journal he kept ends abruptly the next day. In his final entry, a single sentence, the silence moved. His disappearance remains unexplained. And yet, the silence endures. It moves through archives, through forgotten monasteries, through private collections guarded by people who do not know why they guard them. It waits patiently, neither hiding nor revealing, existing in the space between discovery and forgetting. There is a theory among certain historians, never published, only spoken of in private circles, that the keeper's silence is not meant to suppress knowledge but to preserve timing. That the manuscript's truths are not forbidden, only delayed. That one day, when humanity has learned to listen without greed, without conquest, the silence will break on its own, revealing not a book, but a mirror. Because perhaps the manuscript is not the record of a lost civilization at all. Perhaps it is a reflection, a memory of what humanity once was and could become again. The keeper's duty, then, is to hold that reflection safe until we are ready to face it, until we are able to see ourselves without distortion. In that sense, the manuscript silence is a mercy. It spares us from truths we are not yet wise enough to bear. It guards us from our own hunger for mastery. And the keeper's role is not to decide who may know, but when. As night deepens and stars spread like ancient text across the sky, the keeper listens again, not for voices, not for meaning, but for alignment. Somewhere in the rhythm of the universe, the manuscript breathes. Its pulse merges with the heartbeat of the world. It waits, patient as stone, quiet as the spaces between stars. And in that waiting, the keeper understands the oldest truth of all, that silence is not emptiness, but potential. It is the soil from which meaning grows, the breath before creation, the pause before revelation. The manuscript's power is not in what it says, but in what it withholds. So the keeper remains silent, watching, listening, preserving. And through that silence, the manuscript survives, untouched, unseen, eternal. Waiting for the moment when humanity learns not just to read the past, but to listen to it. For centuries, scholars, priests, and seekers have chased the shadow of the Vatican's forbidden manuscript, a ghostly text rumored to contain a version of human history older than civilization itself. But the silence that cloaked it began to tremble in the late 20th century, not from revelation, but from accident, or perhaps destiny disguised as coincidence. It began deep within the Vatican's secret archives, a labyrinth of stone corridors and vaulted chambers stretching beneath the apostolic palace. Few outside the church even knew its true size. Fewer still were permitted beyond its gates. The air there is colder, almost watchful, filled with the quiet hum of time itself. Dust motes drift like suspended memories. Every step echoes with the weight of centuries. In 1978, an archivist named Matteo Luciani, a quiet, methodical man known for his devotion to order, was assigned to reclassify several forgotten manuscripts. He had worked within the archives for nearly 20 years, content in the silence of parchment and candlelight. But one night, while cross-referencing an index that hadn't been opened since the early 1600s, Matteo noticed something strange. A reference number with no corresponding record. It was as if one document had been deliberately erased from the catalog. Not lost, but hidden. The missing reference led him to a sealed compartment behind an unused shelving alcove. The seal bore the insignia of Pope Sylvester II, the so-called wizard pope of the 10th century, long rumored to have made a pact with forbidden knowledge. Matteo hesitated. Breaking a papal seal without authorization was a crime punishable by excommunication. But something in the stillness compelled him forward, a quiet, almost magnetic certainty that whatever lay beyond that seal had waited for him. When he cracked the ancient wax, a faint scent of myrrh and decay filled the air. Inside, wrapped in blackened linen, was a single codex bound in animal hide, its surface etched with markings too intricate to be purely decorative. No title, no date, just a weight, physical and spiritual, that seemed to bend the air around it. The text inside was unlike anything Matteo had seen. Its script shimmered faintly, as though reacting to light and shadow. Some passages appeared in Latin, others in a language that seemed to shift each time he looked at it. There were diagrams, spirals, celestial orbits, maps that resembled both constellations and the human nervous system. The more he studied it, the more he felt it was studying him in return. Days became nights. Nights became a blur of candlelight and whispers. Matteo stopped sleeping. He began recording his observations in secret journals, convinced he had found what church rumor called the Chronicle of Origins, a forbidden continuation of Genesis, said to describe humanity's creation not as divine design, but as an experiment guided by entities beyond comprehension. The Vatican noticed his change before long. Reports described Matteo as withdrawn, his eyes dark, his speech erratic. When questioned by his superiors, he denied everything, but the sleeplessness had left its mark. His last known entry, scrawled in trembling ink, reads, "It watches from within." The text is not written, it remembers. 2 days later, Matteo vanished. His quarters were found undisturbed, except for a single candle still burning beside an open notebook. The codex was gone, the compartment resealed. The Vatican declared his disappearance an unfortunate accident, a collapse in the archives, perhaps. But no evidence of such collapse was ever found. Yet a whisper spread quietly among those few who worked in the labyrinth below. Some said they saw flickering light where no lamps burned. Others claimed to hear faint murmurs in the aisles, words without language, moving like wind between shelves. One young assistant swore that when he turned a corner one evening, he saw Matteo standing at the end of the hall, pale, motionless, eyes fixed on nothing. When he blinked, the figure was gone. A decade later, a sealed envelope arrived anonymously at a Jesuit seminary in Turin. Inside was a single page, a fragment of parchment written in that same shifting script Matteo had described. Modern analysis could not identify the ink. It contained an illustration of two mirrored human forms connected by a spiral of light, beneath which were 3 Latin words, Homo recollectus est, man is remembered. The Vatican immediately retrieved the fragment. No public record of its existence remains, but a scanned copy circulated briefly among a handful of historians before disappearing from every archive it touched. Those who saw it claimed it matched descriptions of a lost heretical text condemned in the 15th century. One said to claim that human consciousness was not created, but recovered, that we were not the beginning of life's story, but its return. This is where the lines between history and myth dissolve, because what Matteo found or awakened may not have been the manuscript itself, but its echo, a reemergence, a reminder that knowledge, like memory, cannot be erased, only postponed. The Vatican's public silence since then has been absolute, but silence can sometimes speak louder than denial. In the years following Matteo's disappearance, portions of the archives were sealed indefinitely. The section he worked in, designated Archivum Obscurum, remains closed even today, accessible only by direct papal permission. What was so dangerous about a forgotten book that it had to be hidden again? What truth could threaten a church that has survived schisms, wars, and empires? Perhaps it wasn't a truth against faith, but one too vast to fit within it. A story of humanity not as divine creation, but as a fragment of something older. A species whose memory was shattered and rewritten. A civilization that once reached for the stars, fell into silence, and began again, believing itself the first. Some believe the manuscript describes this cycle, an eternal return of humanity, each age forgetting the last, each rebirth guided by those who remember. If that is true, then Matteo's discovery was not an accident, but the turning of that cycle once more. The seal he broke may have been more than physical. It may have been temporal, a lock on time itself. And when it broke, the memory that had been sealed for 1,000 years began to breathe again, not in words, but in the dreams of those who listen. Somewhere beneath the marble and sanctuaries of the Vatican, a single candle still burns. The flame flickers, steady and patient, waiting for the next keeper, the next listener. And as long as that flame survives, the manuscript endures, whispering through silence, pulsing beneath the surface of history, waiting for humanity to remember what it once was. For centuries, theologians and scientists have debated the story of creation, one bound by faith, the other by evolution. But somewhere between myth and memory lies a story that belongs to neither. A story whispered in fragments through forbidden manuscripts, half-erased symbols, and the trembling hands of those who dare to look too closely. It is this story the Vatican's lost manuscript is said to tell, the Chronicle of Origins. When rumors of Matteo Luciani's discovery began to leak in private academic circles, a handful of linguists and historians attempted to reconstruct what the text might have contained. Their findings, though fragmented, hinted at something extraordinary, not a holy scripture, not a scientific record, but something in between. A narrative that described humanity as part of a continuum far older than Earth itself. According to these reconstructions, the manuscript begins not with "in the beginning," but within remembrance. It suggests that existence is cyclical, not linear, that the universe is not a creation, but a recollection. The text implies that consciousness existed before matter, that the cosmos is an unfolding memory rediscovering itself through form. Humanity, within this vision, is not the result of divine intervention or random mutation, but the latest vessel through which memory has chosen to awaken. It is said that long before what we call history, beings walked the earth who were not entirely human. Creatures who remembered the stars not as points of light, but as places once called home. The manuscript refers to them as the architects of dawn. According to its verses, they were the first to shape clay with thought, the first to weave matter with memory. They did not build temples or empires, for their knowledge was inward, a mastery over perception itself. Their downfall, it says, was not war nor pride, but forgetting. The universe, in its endless cycles, demands renewal, and with renewal comes amnesia. Each age, each species that rises and falls, becomes another page in this cosmic chronicle. The architects became myth, their knowledge dissolving into legend. Yet fragments of their memory survived, encoded not in words or symbols, but in the very structure of human consciousness. Some scientists might recognize an echo here. The strange persistence of archetypes across cultures, the universal myths of flood and fire, the inexplicable similarities between creation stories continents apart. Could it be that memory, as the manuscript suggests, is not personal but ancestral, cosmic even? It is here that the Chronicle of Origins begins to blur the boundaries between theology and science. It speaks of light as both divine and physical, the same force that birthed the stars and ignited awareness in the human mind. It describes evolution not as random, but guided by resonant design, an unfolding pattern governed by memory's return. Every living being, it says, carries within it the echo of the first remembering, the instant when the universe became aware of itself. The manuscript's middle chapters, if the fragments are accurate, describe a catastrophic forgetting, a fall, not from grace, but from remembrance, a time when humanity turned outward, seeking meaning in the material world, and lost the ability to hear the pulse beneath it. The text calls this the silence of flesh. It marks the moment when language replaced knowing, when names began to separate rather than unify. One haunting line survives translation almost perfectly, and man, having named the stars, forgot that he was among them. From this silence, it says, rose the first civilizations, echoes trying to rebuild what they no longer understood. Pyramids, ziggurats, megaliths, all attempts to recreate the harmony of the lost design. And at the center of every great empire, a single obsession persisted, the search for origins. The chronicle implies that certain secret orders, priesthoods, and scholars throughout history retained pieces of this memory, fragments of the original resonance. These groups, it says, worked in silence to preserve the knowledge until humanity was ready to remember. The Gnostics, the Hermetics, the alchemists, even the earliest Jesuit astronomers, all in their own way, reaching for that same forgotten pattern. In modern terms, one might call it the search for consciousness itself, the invisible thread connecting mind and matter. But to the Vatican, the implications were perilous. If humanity was not created by God, but by memory, if divinity itself was something evolving within, then the foundations of faith, authority, and meaning would tremble. And yet, there's another way to read it, not as heresy, but as fulfillment. Perhaps the Chronicle does not deny creation, but deepens it. Perhaps it suggests that God is not separate from creation at all, but experiencing itself through it. That every human life, every birth and death, is another heartbeat of the divine remembering itself. If that is true, then Matteo Luciani did not uncover a threat to belief. He uncovered its evolution. The danger was never in the words, but in the awakening they could bring. Among the fragments analyzed before being seized, one passage stands out, a verse that some believe Matteo himself copied before vanishing. It reads, "The memory sleeps within the clay. When the clay learns to dream, the stars shall remember their name." It is a promise and a warning, a suggestion that humanity's next great leap will not be technological, but spiritual, not the conquest of space, but the reawakening of memory. After the alleged rediscovery of this text, small ripples began to appear in unrelated fields, breakthroughs in consciousness studies, discoveries in genetic memory, and renewed interest in ancient myths. It was as if the idea itself had been released into the collective mind, spreading quietly like the return of an old song. But within the Vatican, the Chronicle remains sealed, its existence denied, its message buried under centuries of caution. Some say the Church fears its truth. Others say it protects us from it. Perhaps both are true, because if the Chronicle's message is real, then humanity stands on the edge of its own remembrance, the moment when the silence of flesh ends and the memory of stars begins again. And maybe that is the true reason the manuscript has been hidden for so long. Not to suppress knowledge, but to protect the fragile world we've built upon forgetting. Because remembering, as the Chronicle warns, is not without consequence. Once the mind remembers the stars, it can no longer pretend to belong to Earth alone. The manuscript's trail winds deeper still, into the realm of forbidden knowledge, a realm where history meets myth, and truth becomes a question rather than an answer. Among the fragments is a recurring theme, that the manuscript contains not only the record of humanity's past, but a knowledge that could reshape the future. This is why it has been guarded so jealously. The manuscript is said to contain wisdom so powerful it transcends time, knowledge that could alter the course of humanity itself. Some call it the Chronicle of Origins. Others call it the Forbidden Memory. Whatever its name, those who have sought to describe it as the most dangerous book ever written. The fragments speak of knowledge buried in symbols and allegory, a knowledge so potent that it could change the way we understand ourselves. One fragment speaks of a key of ages, a principle so powerful that it could unlock the hidden structure of reality itself. Another hints at a memory before time, a truth so profound that humanity was never meant to remember it. To the Church, such knowledge is not simply dangerous. It is dangerous in a way that threatens the very foundation of authority. Faith rests on certain truths. The moment those truths are challenged, the structure of belief itself is at risk. The manuscript, if it exists, is a challenge not only to history, but to the core of faith. This is the heart of the danger. The manuscript does not merely recount events. It offers a map of understanding, a map that could alter everything humanity believes about its origin, its purpose, and its destiny. And for that reason, the manuscript is not simply a relic. It is a challenge. The fragments suggest that the knowledge contained within the manuscript is not static. It evolves with those who approach it. It is not a book to be read once, but a text to be interpreted again and again, revealing new truths to those prepared to understand them. This makes it more than a manuscript. It makes it a living document. Scholars who have dared to study the fragments speak of their elusive nature. The manuscript does not reveal itself easily. Its words change meaning depending on the seeker's understanding. Some fragments seem to contradict each other. Others vanish entirely when examined too closely. It is as if the manuscript itself is aware of who seeks it. This makes the manuscript not just a record of origins, but a test. To approach, it is to enter a labyrinth of thought, a labyrinth where the seeker must question not only history, but their own assumptions. This is why the Church's guardians have insisted on secrecy, because the manuscript is not a simple truth to be given, but a truth to be earned. The danger of such knowledge is not purely academic. It carries consequences that reach into every aspect of life. The fragments hint that the manuscript contains knowledge of the human mind, of memory, and of consciousness itself. It is a knowledge that could alter the nature of human identity. Some scholars believe that this is why the manuscript has been hidden so carefully. Knowledge that changes human perception is not merely dangerous. It is transformative. And transformation has the power to destabilize societies, religions, and nations. The manuscript's secrecy may not be an act of suppression, but of preservation. Yet preservation comes at a cost. To hide such knowledge is to deny humanity the chance to understand itself fully. It is to keep a part of human history locked away, forever beyond reach. And this is a moral question that has haunted seekers for centuries. Is it right to protect such a secret, or is it a betrayal of humanity itself? The manuscript's fragments themselves seem aware of this question. They speak of guardians who have wrestled with the choice, to reveal or to conceal, to protect or to destroy. This tension lies at the heart of the manuscript story. It is not merely a chronicle of the past, but a mirror reflecting humanity's struggle with truth itself. There are those who believe the manuscript's greatest danger is not the knowledge it contains, but the way it changes those who seek it. To possess such a secret is to carry a burden beyond measure. And this may be why its guardians demand silence, because knowledge without readiness can destroy as much as it creates. The trail of the manuscript is filled with warnings. Scholars who have pieced together its fragments speak of the hour of awakening and the peril of revelation. These phrases suggest that the manuscript's knowledge comes with a price that humanity must be prepared to pay. For centuries, this has been the reason the manuscript remains hidden, not merely to protect faith, but to protect humanity from itself, to guard against the possibility that such knowledge, once revealed, could unravel not only belief but the very fabric of existence. And yet the question persists. If such knowledge exists, should it remain hidden forever? Or is there a moment when humanity must be ready to face the truth? The manuscript, if it exists, holds the answer to that question, but it has guarded its secret for centuries, not by force alone, but by silence. The fragments are its voice, whispers left behind to guide those who seek, but never to give away the whole. This is the paradox of the manuscript. It is both a guide and a test, a truth and a secret, a treasure and a danger. Its story is not a simple history to be told, but a mystery to be lived. And at the heart of that mystery lies the question that drives every seeker. If the manuscript exists, what is the knowledge it hides? And what would it mean if humanity were to finally understand it? In the early years of the 21st century, the Vatican quietly launched a project under the Pontifical Academy of Sciences known only by its code name, Operatio Lux. Officially, it was a digital restoration initiative, an effort to preserve centuries-old manuscripts using high-resolution imaging and AI-assisted reconstruction. Unofficially, it was something far more guarded. Beneath the routine scanning of ancient texts lay a hidden directive to re-examine the Chronicle of Origins. The Chronicle had long been considered myth, a forbidden document buried deep within the Vatican's sealed archives, known only to a few archivists. But digital preservation required the reclassification of damaged codices, and among them was a set of vellum pages mislabeled Codex Magisterium 204b. When the imaging scans began, what emerged was not merely text, but intricate geometry embedded between lines. Faint etchings invisible to the naked eye, now glowing under ultraviolet light. Father Thomas Alvary, a cryptographer and theologian with a background in mathematical linguistics, was among the first to notice the anomaly. At first, he assumed the markings were calibration errors, tiny spirals, arcs, and interlocking triangles woven beneath the script. But when the patterns began repeating in precise intervals across unrelated pages, Alvary realized he was looking at something intentional, a code hidden not in words, but in ratios. Each page of the Chronicle corresponded to a mathematical proportion. When transcribed digitally, those proportions formed harmonic frequencies, numerical values that, when converted into sound, created haunting tones of resonance. The team called them the notes of creation. At first, it seemed poetic, a mystical artifact echoing music. But when the Vatican's physicists at the Castel Gandolfo Observatory analyzed the tones, they discovered something startling. The frequencies aligned exactly with oscillations found in the cosmic microwave background, the faint radiation left over from the birth of the universe. It was as though the book was not describing the cosmos, but vibrating in harmony with it. Alvary became consumed by the discovery. He began overlaying the geometries from each page, layer upon layer, until a larger image began to form, a spiral, intersecting with 7 precise nodes. The same spiral Father Morelli had found centuries earlier in art and architecture. But this time, it was not just a symbol. It was a map, one that extended not across Earth, but into space. When the nodes were plotted according to their ratios, they aligned with specific points in the night sky: Sirius, Alcyone, Vega, Antares, Rigel, Betelgeuse, and one coordinate in deep space where no known star existed. That coordinate, when calculated, matched the location of a faint radio anomaly first recorded by the Arecibo Observatory in 1974, an unexplained, repeating signal lasting only 3 seconds, known then as the silent pulse. The realization was staggering. The Chronicle's geometry had predicted a signal recorded millennia later. Within weeks, Operatio Lux was reclassified under highest secrecy. The team was divided, their work isolated. Access was revoked for all external researchers. But Alvari continued, working alone in his Vatican quarters late into the night. The further he decoded, the more the Chronicle seemed to shift from scripture into something else, something like an instruction. The spiral, he found, was not merely symbolic. It encoded time. Each node represented an epoch of awakening, 7 moments when human consciousness would realign with its source. According to the cipher, the 6th alignment was near. He cross-referenced the data with astronomical cycles and found that the next major solar conjunction with Sirius, one of the key nodes, would occur precisely on December 21st, 2028. The same date long predicted by various esoteric traditions as the time of illumination. The Chronicle had spoken of it in veiled language. When a mirror of light turns upon itself, the sleepers shall hear the echo of their first breath. Alvari's notes became frantic. He began leaving fragments of equations scrawled across parchment, equations describing recursive harmonics that linked thought, light, and gravity, as if consciousness itself were a measurable force. He theorized that the Chronicle's authors were not chroniclers of faith, but scientists of a forgotten age who had encoded cosmology into theology, hiding quantum knowledge within sacred metaphor. One evening, the Vatican servers detected an unauthorized data transfer. A fragment of the Chronicle's cipher had been uploaded to an encrypted satellite channel, bouncing through servers across 3 continents before vanishing into the dark web. The next morning, Alvari was gone. His quarters were sealed, his computer destroyed. Officially, he was reassigned to missionary work in South America. Unofficially, no record of his transfer existed. Weeks later, a journalist from La Repubblica received an anonymous package, a small USB drive containing sound files labeled Cantus Orbis, the song of the world. The tones were soft, low, and rhythmic, almost like breathing. When analyzed through spectrum mapping, the audio revealed faint visual shapes, spirals, crosses, waves of light. The same pattern again. Experts dismissed it as digital art. But among fringe scientific circles, rumors spread that the sound contained harmonic data capable of altering neural rhythms, inducing calm, memory, even visions. And so the legend of the notes of creation entered the modern world. Within the Vatican, silence reigned. Operatio Lux was quietly dissolved, and all reference to the project erased. But satellites continued to monitor the same region of space, the coordinate of the 7th node, the one without a star. For reasons not publicly disclosed, the Vatican Observatory has increased its nighttime monitoring schedule since 2022, focusing precisely on that point. No official statement has ever explained why. Yet those who worked with Alvari remember his final words in the project's last encrypted log. The Chronicle does not tell us where we came from. It tells us when we will remember. Outside, the city of Rome sleeps under its luminous dome. The bells of St. Peter's toll through the midnight fog, each note echoing like a heartbeat from another age. Somewhere beneath that ancient stone, the vault of forbidden manuscripts remains sealed, but light, once revealed, cannot be unlearned. And as the pulse of the universe hums through silent frequencies, one truth seems to shimmer beneath every equation. every prayer, every sound. That remembrance was never lost. It was only waiting for us to listen. In the winter of 2029, a faint radio signal was detected across multiple observatories, from the Atacama Desert in Chile to the Max Planck Institute in Germany. It was subtle, almost buried beneath cosmic noise, a low rhythmic pulse repeating every 31 hours. The signal bore no pattern at first glance, but when its waveform was inverted, researchers noticed something impossible. Its harmonic structure mirrored the frequencies encoded within Father Alvary's leaked notes of creation. At first, scientists dismissed the connection. Coincidence, perhaps. But coincidences began stacking like mirrors reflecting one another. When the tones were played through neural mapping software, they triggered measurable changes in alpha brainwave patterns, subtle synchronization, as though the human brain recognized the rhythm before the ears did. It was as if the universe were whispering in a language older than sound. By spring, the anomaly had acquired a name: the Vatican Pulse. Conspiracy forums buzzed, spiritual groups declared it a divine awakening, and physicists at CERN quietly opened an internal investigation into whether the frequency might relate to deep space quantum fluctuations. They found that the signal seemed to respond to observation, its strength increasing slightly when monitored directly, weakening when ignored. That single discovery changed everything. For the first time in recorded science, something beyond Earth appeared to acknowledge consciousness, not biologically, but mathematically. The pulse was not transmitting information. It was mirroring the act of being seen. Meanwhile, inside the Vatican, unease grew. The Pope's Science Council convened in secrecy, reviewing restricted reports from Operatio Lux. They knew the signal's patterns. They had heard them before. They also knew the date embedded in Alvary's equations, December 21st, 2028, the so-called sixth alignment. And now, the pulse had appeared almost exactly 1 year later. Some within the council believed it was a continuation, a resonant echo from an earlier cosmic event. Others whispered what no one dared say aloud, that the Chronicle's prophecy had begun. Among them was Sister Lucia Navarro, a Jesuit astrophysicist known for her calm intellect and skepticism. She was chosen to lead the Vatican's liaison team with international observatories. But as she delved into the data, her skepticism began to falter. She found that the signal's coordinates, the same seventh node in the Chronicle spiral, were not empty after all. Recent deep field scans showed faint gravitational lensing around that region, suggesting something massive yet invisible. Not a star, not a planet, something else. When the signal's next pulse arrived, Lucia noticed it came not from deep space, but from multiple points, Earth included. Sensors at the Vatican Observatory detected microbursts of the same frequency emanating from underground chambers near Rome, as though the Earth itself were echoing the cosmic rhythm. That night, she descended into the archives beneath St. Peter's, seeking answers. The guards had changed. New personnel were assigned to the lower vaults. The air was heavy with dust and the faint hum of dehumidifiers. She followed the dim corridor until she reached the sealed section, the one that had once held the Chronicle of Origins. It was gone. In its place lay a single metallic case, unmarked except for a small brass plate engraved with one word: Memoria. Inside, she found what looked like a crystalline tablet, transparent, etched with spiraling filigree resembling Alvary's geometries. When she passed her flashlight over it, faint letters appeared, glowing softly like embers under ash. It wasn't paper nor glass. Some kind of composite, ancient yet impossibly advanced. The letters formed a single phrase in Latin: Nos recordimer. We remember. The lights flickered. Somewhere deep below, A low vibration echoed through the stone walls, rhythmic, pulsing, almost alive. Lucia froze, her pulse matching the rhythm unconsciously. Then, as quickly as it began, the sound ceased. She closed the case and hurried to the surface, her heart pounding with a mixture of awe and fear. Within hours, seismic sensors across Italy detected micro-tremors aligned perfectly with the same pulse interval. The frequency had shifted, now synchronized with the planet's Schumann resonance, the natural heartbeat of Earth's electromagnetic field. It wasn't just a signal anymore. It was a resonance event. News leaked. Social media exploded. People across the world began reporting strange experiences during the pulse cycles. Vivid dreams, sudden déjà vu, unexplained feelings of connection or dread. Some claimed they could hear the hum when near ancient sites, Stonehenge, Giza, Machu Picchu, as if those places acted like tuning forks. Scientists tried to explain it through psychology and suggestion, but the patterns were too consistent. Electroencephalographic studies confirmed that human brainwave coherence increased during each pulse window. Something, or someone, was resonating with humanity on a collective scale. Lucia knew what the chronicle had implied, that memory was not an individual construct, but a cosmic one, a shared field waiting to awaken. Yet to speak that aloud would be heresy. She found herself torn between duty and revelation, trapped between science and faith, both pointing toward the same incomprehensible truth. In her private journal, she wrote, "It's not that we are remembering the universe. It's that the universe is remembering us." The Vatican's public stance remained silence. But internally, preparations began. The observatory shifted to full night cycles. The archives reinforced containment protocols for remaining ancient artifacts. And beneath the Apostolic Palace, an unused chapel was reopened, one designed centuries ago around the same spiral geometry now appearing in data and light. Whatever was coming, they intended to meet it not with fear, but with ritual. Outside, the pulse grew louder. Instruments in Australia and Greenland detected harmonic overtones forming a pattern, a wave that encircled the Earth every 24 hours. When converted into visible spectrum frequencies, it revealed the faint outline of a spiral made of light, expanding, turning, echoing the same pattern hidden within the Chronicle of Origins. Humanity stood unknowingly on the brink of recognition. And somewhere far beyond the stars, in the cold silence of the coordinate once thought empty, the signal changed pitch. Higher now, clearer, carrying within it what sounded impossibly like language. 3 tones, then silence, then one final pulse, soft as breath. Remember, it began subtly. A shift in the air, a heaviness behind every sound, as if the atmosphere itself had become aware. Across continents, people reported the same phenomenon, not chaos but stillness. Birds paused mid-flight, animals turned their heads toward the sky, and at 3:14 a.m. Universal Time, every compass on Earth wavered a fraction of a degree east, then realigned. The Vatican called it the moment of resonance. For the first time in human history, the pulse did not arrive as a signal from the stars. It came from within, a vibration rising through the ground, through oceans, through every human heart. Cities went quiet. Electricity flickered, but did not fail. The air seemed alive, humming with invisible symmetry. In Tokyo, entire subway platforms stood in silence as the hum deepened, almost musical. In the Sahara, desert nomads reported feeling the breath of stone. At CERN, the Large Hadron Collider sensors picked up a sudden surge in neutrino density, a spike that mirrored no known particle event. And in the Vatican Observatory, Sister Lucia Navarro stood before her monitors, watching as the spiral pattern completed itself on screen. It was no longer geometry, it was language. The spiral's inner rings had begun rotating counterclockwise, forming what looked like ancient script. Not Latin, not Greek, but a proto-symbolic language that matched glyphs carved into the crystalline tablet she'd found in the archives. The same pattern that had been etched into the Chronicle centuries earlier. She cross-referenced the shapes with a linguistic AI model, and to her astonishment, fragments began to translate. The message was not a command, nor a prophecy. It was a memory. We were never gods. We were witnesses of the awakening. The spark was ours to keep, not to worship. The AI continued parsing fragments. Another phrase emerged. When a pulse becomes flesh, the echo shall see itself. Lucia stared at the screen, heart racing. It wasn't describing an external visitation. It was describing consciousness remembering its origin. The pulse wasn't coming from space. It was emanating through humanity, reawakening what had been dormant in the human mind for millennia. And the Chronicle had foretold it, not as the end of faith, but as its transformation. News of the phenomenon spread faster than governments could control. Live broadcasts showed synchronized anomalies. Northern lights visible over the equator, deep-sea plankton glowing in perfect spiral patterns, entire forests pulsating with bioluminescent rhythm. Scientists were speechless. Priests fell to their knees. For a brief, unmeasured hour, the world seemed unified by something wordless, awe. In the Vatican's apostolic palace, the Pope addressed the College of Cardinals in a private convocation. His voice trembled not from fear, but reverence. "If this is the same pulse our ancestors feared," he said, "then perhaps they mistook remembrance for rebellion." He paused, eyes lowered. Maybe the Chronicle was never forbidden because it lied, but because it told too much truth. Outside the walls, thousands gathered in St. Peter's Square, some praying, others simply standing with their palms raised to the air, feeling the vibration. Many wept without knowing why, as if some ancient sorrow had surfaced, the memory of forgetting itself. Lucia recorded every fluctuation, comparing global resonance spikes to archived seismic data. She discovered a repeating ratio, the same harmonic proportions encoded in the Chronicle's geometry. Each pulse mirrored the Fibonacci sequence, as though life's blueprint was revealing itself through sound. Her discovery spread among physicists. Consciousness, biology, and cosmic resonance were not separate phenomena. They were threads of one pattern. As the world searched for meaning, an unexpected event occurred. Satellite telescopes registered a brief flare from the coordinate once thought empty, the seventh node. Not a supernova, not a signal, a reflection, light bending backward, as if space itself had looked into a mirror. That reflection struck Earth's upper atmosphere, creating a temporary aurora visible from both poles simultaneously, something previously considered impossible. The light shimmered in slow waves, golden and blue, forming the unmistakable shape of a spiral turning inward. In that moment, countless people claimed to see, not with eyes, but with memory. They saw flashes, fragments, moments of ancient landscapes, vast cities beneath stars, faces both human and not, looking upward. Some felt as though they were being remembered by the universe itself. In hospitals, coma patients stirred for the first time in years. Children described dreams of the Golden Garden and the Watchers of Light. In the chaos of awe and confusion, one undeniable truth began to crystallize. The pulse was not destruction. It was restoration. Lucia's data confirmed it. The Earth's electromagnetic field was stabilizing, energy imbalances diminishing. It was as if the planet had entered harmonic coherence with something greater. And yet, a question lingered. What was the final message hidden in the chronicle? In the Pope's chamber, Lucia presented her findings, the translated fragments, the resonance data, and one final cipher still unsolved. The Pope listened silently, then asked, "If this awakening is real, what happens when we remember everything?" Lucia hesitated. "Then we will no longer need faith," she whispered, "because faith will become knowledge." The Pope looked out the window toward the glowing sky. "And knowledge," he said softly, "was the first sin and perhaps the last salvation." The world continued to hum. The pulse slowed, almost like a heartbeat settling after exertion. And then one final global resonance, the largest yet, rippled through Earth's magnetic field. It carried no sound, no light, only stillness. When it passed, the sky cleared. The aurora faded. Instruments normalized. The hum was gone. For a brief moment, it seemed over. Humanity exhaled, unaware that something irreversible had begun. In the Vatican archives, deep below the basilica, the crystalline tablet now pulsed faintly with its own light, independent of power or touch. Its spiral glowed once more, and then split, forming a mirror image of itself. The Chronicle's prophecy was complete. The seventh node had awakened, and humanity had become its own reflection. The air inside the apostolic archive was colder than usual. The hum of the dehumidifiers seemed louder, like a heartbeat beneath stone. Sister Lucia Navarro descended once again into the vault, following the spiral staircase carved centuries ago. Each step echoed with faint rhythm, the same rhythm that had once come from the heavens. She carried the crystalline tablet in a protective case, its inner light now faint but constant. The pulse had stopped days earlier, yet the artifact pulsed on, its glow synchronized to her own heartbeat. It was as though it had bonded with her, or with humanity itself. She reached the inner chamber where the Vatican's linguistic AI, Veritas Dei, had been running continuous decryption on the Chronicle's final cipher. The screen flickered softly in the darkness, displaying thousands of symbols rotating like constellations. At the center, a phrase had begun to appear, incomplete but unmistakable. "We were human once." Lucia froze. She replayed the last hour of data. The algorithm had detected layered linguistic structures, not in any ancient tongue, but in something self-evolving, as if the text were rewriting itself. The Chronicle was responding to the pulse, adapting its own language in real time. She activated the translation mode, and the AI continued. "We were the memory of the beginning. We did not create you. We became you." The words pulsed across the screen, not as revelation, but as recognition. It was not describing gods, aliens, or even celestial teachers. It was describing humanity itself, a lineage of consciousness stretching back not through time, but through cycles of remembrance. Lucia felt her throat tighten. Every ancient religion had spoken of creators who descended from the heavens, beings of light, angels, watchers, gods. But what if they had not descended at all? What if they had fallen inward, into matter, into life, into us? The Chronicle's geometry had always mirrored the spiral of DNA. The hidden ratios matched cellular resonance patterns. The message was clear now. The writers of the Chronicle were not external beings. They were our ancestors before biology, the conscious architects who chose to incarnate into physical existence to experience time itself. The forbidden manuscript was not a warning against sin or science. It was a record of voluntary amnesia, the story of consciousness choosing to forget so it could rediscover itself through evolution, art, pain, and faith. In the Vatican control room above, the Pope received Lucia's call. Her voice trembled with restrained awe. "Holy Father," she said, "the Chronicle's origin is not divine in the way we thought. It's human, but older than humanity as we know it." Silence filled the line. Then his soft reply, "Explain." Lucia hesitated. "The pulse, the resonance, the signal, they're not messages from beyond. They're echoes of a memory embedded in the structure of existence. The Chronicle was written by those who first entered form, the first minds that became matter." He exhaled slowly. "And what does that make us?" Lucia looked at the glowing tablet. "The continuation," she said. "The universe remembering itself through us." For a long moment, neither spoke. The truth felt too vast, too fragile to name. Later that night, Lucia uploaded the full translation into a secure Vatican database. The completed text filled the screen, a series of poetic verses unlike any scripture ever known. It read, "Before the fire, there was silence. Before the silence, there was thought. And we were the thought that dreamed itself awake. To remember, we divided. To return, we must see. We left the mark of our mind in matter, a pattern, a spiral, a sound. When the seventh spiral turns, the dreamer shall open its eyes." Lucia read it aloud under her breath. Each word seemed to vibrate through the air, forming faint ripples in the dust motes illuminated by her lamp. It wasn't prophecy, it was instruction. The Chronicle wasn't foretelling the end of the world. It was describing the awakening of awareness within creation itself. She thought of Father Alvary, the man who vanished after discovering the cipher. Had he known this? Had he realized that the divine and the human were never separate, but phases of one eternal being trying to remember itself? She scrolled further. At the bottom of the manuscript, one final line appeared, untranslatable, a string of symbols no algorithm could decode. But when she overlaid them onto the spiral geometry, they aligned perfectly with the coordinates of a human brain's neural network, as if the final key to the Chronicle was not written in text, but in us. In the following days, reports from around the world continued. Dreams of unity, spontaneous creative bursts, new languages forming in children's drawings. It was as though humanity had been given a seed of memory, not knowledge, but knowing. The Vatican faced a choice: reveal the truth or protect it. Many feared chaos if people believed divinity resided within. Others, like Lucia, saw it as liberation. During a private audience, the Pope summoned her once more. "If this chronicle is the mirror of our origin," he said softly, "then faith must find its reflection within science." Lucia nodded. Maybe that's what the chronicle meant by awakening. Not miracles, but memory restored. Creation realizing it is still creating. He looked at the glowing tablet resting on his desk. Its light flickered gently, forming two spirals intertwined, like DNA, like infinity folding upon itself. "Perhaps," he whispered, "God never left. He simply became us to see himself anew." Outside, the bells of St. Peter's tolled, their sound carried by the wind through the sleeping city. For the first time in centuries, the Vatican archives' doors remained open, light spilling onto the marble floor. Lucia stood in the doorway, tablet in hand, gazing at the horizon where dawn began to rise, a quiet golden pulse spreading across the sky. The same light reflected in her eyes, the same pattern within every cell, every thought, every heartbeat. She understood then what the Chronicle had always meant. Humanity was not the child of the divine. It was the divine, remembering its childhood. The dawn that followed was unlike any other. Cities across the world woke to a strange and silent light. a calm radiance that seemed to have no single source. It was softer than the sun, yet it reached deeper than daylight, as if the very air remembered something it had once been. Birds sang earlier than usual. The sky held a faint shimmer of gold and pale blue, layered like a veil of awareness descending upon the earth. By mid-morning, news channels around the world began to report the Vatican's quiet statement. Not a decree, not a denial, just a single line transmitted through global networks. The Chronicle of Origins speaks of memory, not apocalypse. Those words rippled through languages and nations. Scientists, philosophers, monks, and poets all began interpreting the same revelation through their own lenses. The Chronicle had spoken not of divine punishment or alien salvation, but of remembrance, that life itself was the continuation of a thought too vast to name. In Geneva, particle physicists reanalyzed the resonance patterns of the pulse. What they found unsettled them. The frequency matched the harmonic ratio of the human brain's theta waves, the rhythm of deep meditation, the frequency of dreaming. The pulse had not come from outer space. It had come from within the biosphere itself, amplified by a signal only life could generate. In Tokyo, neuroscientists reported that participants exposed to the Chronicle's geometric patterns exhibited synchronized brainwave activity across hemispheres, a temporary dissolution of the illusion of separation. One researcher called it the biological echo of unity. Another, more quietly, called it prayer without religion. In Jerusalem, monks and rabbis gathered at the ancient walls, not to ask for miracles, but to share silence. For the first time in centuries, prayer became conversation, not with heaven, but with the earth itself. Meanwhile, in the Americas, artists began painting symbols they had never seen before, spirals of intertwined light and shadow. Musicians composed melodies with intervals that resonated with the Chronicle's mathematical structure. Children began drawing the same shapes in sand and chalk without ever having seen them before. It was as though the collective mind of humanity had been subtly retuned, vibrating to a forgotten scale of harmony. Governments hesitated to interpret it. Some dismissed it as mass psychogenic influence, a global cognitive contagion. Others, more open-minded, convened emergency councils of philosophers and astrophysicists. But there was nothing to contain. No threat, no virus, no conspiracy. Just an awakening, silent, unstoppable, gentle. At the United Nations headquarters in New York, a special assembly was held under dimmed lights. Sister Lucia Navarro was invited to speak. She walked to the podium carrying the crystalline tablet, now fully dormant, its glow extinguished since the Vatican's final translation. When she spoke, her voice carried the calm certainty of someone who had seen the invisible made visible. "We searched the heavens for our origin," she said. "We measured stars, decoded signals, built machines to listen to the dark. But all along, the message was not beyond us, it was within us." The Chronicle was never about gods or visitors. It was about the memory of creation remembering itself through the human heart. A silence followed, deep and reverent. Even the translators paused, unsure how to render the feeling into other tongues. Lucia continued, "What we call God, the ancients called light. What science calls consciousness, the mystics called soul. They're the same force, wearing different faces across time. The Chronicle teaches us that creation was not an event, but an ongoing act, one that continues through us. Every thought, every kindness, every discovery continues the work of the makers because we are the makers." Some wept openly. Others simply bowed their heads. Cameras broadcast her words across the globe. That night, billions of people sat in silence before their screens, not out of fear or worship, but out of quiet recognition. In the weeks that followed, strange changes began to manifest. Not supernatural, but subtle and profound. Levels of global conflict dropped unexpectedly. Negotiations that had stalled for years suddenly reached resolution. Art, science, and spirituality began to intertwine in ways unseen since the Renaissance. It was as though humanity had exhaled a collective burden it never realized it carried. In small villages and megacities alike, people began forming circles of remembrance, gatherings without creed or hierarchy. They read from the Chronicles verses, not as commandments, but as meditations. The words became a new kind of music, a rhythm that reminded listeners of something ancient yet intimate, the feeling of being part of something vast and alive. Children, born after the pulse, seemed to carry a strange stillness in their gaze. Doctors noticed higher coherence between emotional and logical brain regions in infants exposed to the geometry of the chronicle. It was as if the next generation was already born remembering what the previous had to rediscover. In the Vatican, the Pope walked the silent halls at dusk, carrying a single candle. He paused before a fresco depicting the creation of Adam. For centuries, humanity had seen that image as a divine gift, the spark of life given by God. But now he saw it differently. The reaching hands were not master in creation. They were reflections of one another, the infinite recognizing itself. He whispered into the stillness. Perhaps paradise was never lost. We just closed our eyes to it. Outside, Rome glowed beneath the stars. In the observatories, astronomers noticed a subtle background fluctuation in cosmic radiation, a rhythmic oscillation perfectly matching the frequency of the pulse. Yet this time, it was not localized to any point in the galaxy. It seemed to emanate everywhere at once, like the heartbeat of the universe itself had begun to align with humanity's. Lucia watched the stars from the archive's rooftop. The tablet rested beside her, inert but warm to the touch. She thought about the journey, the fear, the secrecy, the disbelief. And now, this quiet transformation spreading through the world like dawn through mist. She smiled faintly. We were always looking for our creators, she murmured. But maybe creation was looking through us the whole time. The wind stirred her hair. Somewhere in the distance, church bells and laughter mingled, indistinguishable from each other. Above, a shooting star traced a slow curve across the sky, a single bright reminder that movement, memory, and meaning were all the same dance. And in that stillness, humanity did not pray for salvation. It simply remembered how to be. The world, for the first time in memory, felt quiet, not silent in the way of absence, but still in the way of understanding. It was as though humanity had collectively drawn a breath and chosen not to exhale too quickly, as if some ancient instinct warned that the moment was sacred. Across the earth, the pulse of modern life slowed. Machines hummed softer. Cities dimmed their lights earlier. People began to listen again, to one another, to the world, and to the subtle voice within that had always been waiting. It had been 6 months since Sister Lucia's address to the United Nations. The Chronicle was no longer treated as a relic, nor as heresy. It had become something rarer, a mirror that refused to lie. The Vatican released high-resolution scans of every page, allowing the manuscript to belong to everyone. Universities across continents formed institutes of memory, dedicated not to religion, nor to science, but to the study of consciousness itself. In one such institute, buried beneath the Andes, a group of researchers discovered that when the Chronicle's mathematical patterns were played as sound, they produced a sequence of harmonics identical to the electromagnetic resonance of a human heart. The sound wasn't music in the ordinary sense. It was a vibration of recognition. Those who listened to it often wept without knowing why. Some said it felt like hearing the universe sigh. Others described it as remembering the feeling of being born. Meanwhile, spiritual leaders from every major faith gathered in Florence, in the same cathedral where Galileo once faced the Inquisition. There were no sermons, no arguments, no proclamations. Only a circle of chairs beneath the vast painted dome. The Pope sat beside an imam, a Shinto priest beside a Buddhist nun. A rabbi and a secular physicist shared notes, quietly laughing at the irony of agreeing more than disagreeing. They spoke of light, not the physical light of the sun or stars, but the awareness that flows through everything. A Zen master remarked that perhaps humanity had not found God, but simply remembered its own reflection in creation. An astrophysicist nodded, saying that in every equation of the cosmos, consciousness appeared like a missing variable waiting to be acknowledged. For the first time in history, faith and science spoke the same language, not of proof or prayer, but of presence. In Rome, the archive of shadows, once sealed beneath layers of secrecy, was open to the public. Thousands lined the streets to see the newly constructed Hall of Origins. Within its marble walls, fragments of the chronicle were displayed under soft golden light. Each fragment pulsed faintly, reacting to the heartbeat of those who approached. No guards, no alarms, only quiet reverence. Lucia walked through the hall alone one evening. Her reflection shimmered across the glass cases as she paused before the final fragment, the one with the closing verse she had never been able to translate completely. Its script, a delicate weave of light and motion, always seemed to resist fixed meaning. But that night, as she stood there, the words unfurled in her mind not as text, but as understanding. The end of knowledge is the beginning of remembrance. Tears gathered in her eyes, not from sadness, but from awe that something so ancient could still feel newly born. Outside the museum, crowds gathered nightly beneath the open sky. They no longer prayed upward. They simply sat, sometimes in silence, sometimes in song. Families, strangers, wanderers, all joined by an unspoken feeling that the world had become more alive. Children asked simpler questions now, ones that adults struggled to answer. If the universe remembers us, do we remember it too? In laboratories, physicists studying quantum coherence began using the chronicle geometries as calibration templates. Experiments unexpectedly yielded higher accuracy, as though the act of measurement itself became less chaotic. Some began to whisper that consciousness had entered the equations, that human attention was now part of physics. But perhaps the greatest change was not in technology or theology, but in time itself. Humanity no longer measured history as a march of progress, but as a rhythm, an expansion and return. The ancient past and the far future felt closer than ever before, touching like two ends of a circle. In a quiet monastery overlooking Lake Como, Lucia spent her remaining days teaching a handful of students, historians, scientists, and wanderers who came seeking not answers, but peace. She rarely spoke of the chronicle anymore. The text has done its work, she told them. Now it's the silence that teaches. One afternoon, as the sun descended through the mist, she sat by the window, writing her final letter. Her handwriting trembled, not from weakness, but from reverence for the words she had saved for last. The chronicle was never meant to be understood, only remembered. It does not tell us where we came from, but what we are still becoming. The divine was never elsewhere. It was the echo of our own awareness, waiting for us to listen deeply enough to hear it. She folded the paper, sealed it with wax, and placed it inside the tablet's hollow shell. Then she walked to the edge of the lake. The water shimmered with evening light, the same spectrum seen in the pulse years ago. As she lowered the crystal into the depths, a gentle ripple spread outward, distorting her reflection until it disappeared. Far above, satellites detected a faint, rhythmic signal emerging from Earth's atmosphere. It wasn't the original pulse. It was slower, softer, unmistakably human, like a heartbeat whispering through space. We remember. In that moment, somewhere between Earth and eternity, the chronicle completed its final circle. Its message, carried across ages, decoded by faith and reason alike, was never about the gods who made us, but the creators we would one day become. And as night descended, humanity looked up, not for salvation, not for fear of judgment, but with the simple wonder of knowing it had awakened inside its own story. A child standing beside her mother pointed to a faint light flickering across the horizon, a satellite, or perhaps something older, still traveling between stars. "Is that where we came from?" she asked. Her mother smiled softly. "Maybe," she said, "or maybe that's where we're going." The sky shimmered faintly, as if in response, a soft pulse of light, echoing across the darkness. Not a warning, not a sign, just the quiet memory of the makers, still alive in everything that exists. And in the spaces between stars, the universe seemed to whisper back. The story was never forbidden. It was simply waiting for us to remember. Decades passed. The world changed, not through revolutions or inventions, but through an almost imperceptible deepening of awareness. Humanity had not become utopian nor perfect. There were still disagreements, ambitions, and doubts. Yet beneath all of it, a quieter rhythm endured, a remembrance that refused to fade. Cities grew differently now. Architects designed buildings that seemed to breathe with the land. Glass and stone curve in harmony with wind and water. Energy grids pulsed to the same frequency once detected in the chronicle's geometry. Schools taught not only mathematics and history, but memory, the art of tracing thought back to its source, of seeing the invisible pattern linking all things. And in the heart of Rome, where the first whispers of the chronicle began, a new structure rose, the Archive of Light. It was not a cathedral, nor a museum, but something in between, a sanctuary for both knowledge and wonder. Its walls were translucent stone, glowing softly from within. By day, it reflected the sky. By night, it shimmered like a living constellation. Inside, the halls were silent except for the gentle hum of resonance frequencies playing continuously. The harmonic tone derived from the human heartbeat and the chronicle's wave patterns. Visitors often described feeling as if they were walking through a dream, suspended between centuries. At the center of the archive stood the final chamber, the Vault of Origins. Here, beneath a dome of mirrored light, rested a perfect replica of the chronicle, etched not on crystal, but on light itself. Holographic verses hovered in the air, rotating slowly like stars. The original manuscript had long been returned to the earth, buried in the same lake where Sister Lucia released it. Yet its memory lived here, accessible to all who sought to remember. Pilgrims came from across the world, not to worship but to listen. They stood in silence beneath the dome as the verses unfolded in luminous sequence. Every few minutes, the chamber would darken, and a soft pulse would ripple through the floor, the same rhythm as the human heartbeat. It was not performance. It was participation. One visitor, a child no older than 10, looked up at the glowing patterns and whispered to her father, "It's speaking." Her father smiled gently. "It's listening," he corrected. Outside the archive, new generations lived in a world both ancient and newborn. The Chronicle's message had woven itself into art, science, and philosophy alike. Astrophysicists described consciousness as a luminous continuum. Philosophers spoke of existence as the universe remembering itself through form. Even the skeptical found peace in the mystery, accepting that not all truths need to be dissected to be real. In one of the archive's quiet reading rooms, an elderly man sat surrounded by books. His name was Dr. Elias Moreau, one of the last surviving members of the original decoding team. His hair was silver now, his hands unsteady, but his eyes still carried the restless light of curiosity. He turned the thin pages of his journal, the same one he had kept since those early Vatican days. Between the faded ink and careful notes, a line stood out, written decades earlier during the first translation. If this text is true, we are both the question and the answer. He smiled faintly. We never solved it, he murmured, closing the journal. We just became it. A soft chime echoed through the hall, signaling the archive's twilight cycle. Light dimmed gradually, revealing a ceiling of thousands of faintly glowing points, each one representing a known star system in the galaxy. But among them pulsed one faint, rhythmic light. Elias stared at it for a long time. It wasn't a star. It was Earth, broadcasting the resonance of remembrance into space. No one knew if anyone, or anything, was listening, but somehow that no longer mattered. The purpose was not to send a message outward, but to sustain awareness inward. The act of remembering had become the new form of prayer. In remote monasteries, monks recorded sequences of silence, distributing them as meditative audio across the world. In hospitals, doctors played harmonic tones derived from the Chronicle to calm patients, noting measurable decreases in stress and pain. Farmers aligned crops with cosmic resonance cycles, noticing higher yield and less environmental strain. The once divided worlds of spirit and science had begun to merge seamlessly into daily life. And though Sister Lucia had long since passed, her presence lingered in every corridor of the archive. A bronze statue of her stood at the entrance, not robed or glorified, but holding a single open hand, as if inviting the world to listen again. The plaque beneath read, "She did not find the divine. She remembered it." On the 100th anniversary of the Chronicle's unveiling, humanity gathered once more, not under governments or banners, but under the open night. From deserts to cities, mountains to islands, people stood beneath the same sky, lights dimmed, screen silent. A single synchronized pulse resonated through global transmitters, vibrating through air, water, and stone. The night had grown deep and endless. The stars, once distant and cold, now felt close, not in distance, but in recognition. Their light no longer seemed to travel toward the earth, but from it, as though every human breath had joined the cosmos in conversation. Across the dark curve of the planet, the pulse of memory continued, steady, luminous, and alive. In the archive of light, long after visitors had gone, the final harmonic tone still played. It reverberated through the crystal walls, through the marble floors, through the silent air of Rome. Dust motes shimmered like tiny galaxies suspended in prayer. The hum wasn't mechanical. It was alive, a vibration born from millions of heartbeats aligning in shared remembrance. A janitor making his rounds paused by the central chamber. He wasn't a scholar, nor a believer, just an ordinary man with calloused hands and weary eyes. Yet as he stood beneath the dome, listening to the soft resonance, tears formed unbidden. He couldn't explain it. He simply knew, somewhere deep in his bones, Something had always remembered this sound. Outside, the city lay quiet beneath the stars. For the first time in recorded history, no monuments were lit, no advertisements glowed. Humanity had agreed that, for one night each year, the earth should be dark, not in mourning, but in reverence. They called it the Night of Origins, a night to listen, not speak, to let the world breathe. In distant deserts, people lay on their backs watching the firmament shimmer. In frozen tundras, small groups gathered around gentle fires. In cities, skyscraper rooftops filled with silhouettes staring upward. There were no speeches, no doctrines, no divisions, only silence and the collective heartbeat of a species that had finally learned how to listen to itself. From orbit, astronauts described the planet as glowing faintly, not with light but with rhythm. It's like watching a living organism, one said, a pulse in slow motion. Somewhere beyond the stars, in that vast ocean of unknown, sensors detected a subtle echo, a reply so faint it seemed more like memory than signal. Yet when converted into sound, it matched perfectly the harmonic pattern of the chronicle. Scientists refused to name it. Theologians refused to define it. Artists simply called it the answering. Humanity didn't rush to interpret. The lesson of the chronicle had been learned. Not all revelations demand reaction. Some simply invite stillness. Years passed into centuries. Empires shifted, technologies evolved, languages changed, but the archive remained, preserved not by institutions but by reverence. Pilgrims came from every corner of the world to stand in the Hall of Light and feel that gentle hum vibrate through their chest. Many left changed, carrying the resonance back into their own lives, as kindness, as creativity, as peace. A new generation of historians began to rewrite the story of civilization. They no longer divided time into ages of war and peace, faith and reason. Instead, they spoke of two epochs, before remembrance and after remembrance. The transition between them was not marked by conquest or invention, but by awakening. In the after remembrance world, the definition of knowledge itself transformed. Wisdom was measured not by how much humanity could explain, but by how deeply it could feel connected. Scientific papers began with poetry. Religious texts included mathematical proofs. Art became a bridge, not a battlefield. The separation between matter and meaning dissolved, revealing what the ancients might have called spirit and form. And yet, through all the evolution, one mystery endured, the question that had begun it all. Where did the chronicle come from? Some said it was seeded by an ancient civilization lost to time. Others believed it was encoded in the structure of consciousness itself, a kind of cosmic memory that reawakened when humanity became ready to hear it. But perhaps, as Lucia once whispered before she died, the truth was simpler. We wrote it ourselves, long before we were born. Maybe every world writes its own origin, hidden deep within its collective soul, waiting for the day it dares to remember.